Hey guys, tonight we drift into a place that feels half real, half dream. You're standing on the rim of a city that doesn't so much sit on the ocean as it does float, like a raft stitched together by centuries of stubborn engineering and a pinch of cultural poetry. The sea is quiet, unusually polite for its size, rippling with the patience of a host who knows the party will last all night. And there, just beyond the platforms and walkways, the first lanterns of the evening begin their ascent. They're not firelit, of course. Open flame hasn't been part of city safety protocols for at least 300 years. These are slow-breathing orbs, pulsing like jellyfish, powered by algae that spent all day soaking up sunlight. They rise with a sigh, glowing soft gold, green, even lavender, their colors shifting as though indecisive. You probably won't survive this, if we're being honest. Not because anything here is dangerous, just because you live in a century where floating cities are still theoretical. Lanterns are mostly for backyard birthdays, and the odds of you standing here tonight are about the same as your cat inventing the cure for traffic jams. Still, that's the fun, right? You're allowed to step outside the possible, put on a pair of impossible shoes, and take a stroll anyway. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The horizon line blurs as the first clusters of lanterns glide upward, their paths lazy and curved, like they're too relaxed to obey gravity properly. You walk closer to the edge of the platform, where the sea's black mirror reflects double rows of lights, so that the sky and water seem to compete over who can sparkle harder. One future fact floats into your head. The United Nations Marine Council once estimated that by the 2020s, nearly 15% of humanity would live on modular floating structures. Futurists still argue whether that percentage is optimistic or merely inevitable, but here in this dream, you don't need statistics, only the warm glow bouncing on your skin. You rest your hands on a railing that hums faintly, a sign of the tide energy converters beneath you. The surface vibrates as if the whole city is purring. An older couple to your right is coaxing their lantern out of a biodegradable box. It looks delicate enough to break with a sigh, but when they release it, the orb steadies itself, blinking twice like a sleepy robot before catching the night breeze. You smile. The joke practically writes itself. Somewhere, a committee of lanterns is probably unionizing, demanding longer breaks between flights. The air smells faintly of salt and something citrus, engineered breezes circulated by the city's air scrubbers, flavored intentionally to encourage relaxation. You remember reading once that designers learned to scent the air because people in earlier floating prototypes grew restless, even anxious, without grounding smells. A future Hack 4 peace of mind, basically lemon-scented serenity, whether that's science or placebo, who knows? But you inhale deeply and feel the nerves in your shoulders unclench. Lanterns gather above in a patchy flock. Some drift too close together, then separate like shy dance partners. Others wobble with comic stubbornness before finding their rhythm. A child nearby giggles as her lantern sputters and spins. Her father gently guides it with a long reed stick, nudging it skyward until it stabilizes. You catch yourself grinning. The lanterns might be bioengineered miracles of efficiency, but they still act like toddlers learning to walk. Above, the first constellation begins to form. Programmable guidance systems steer lanterns into star maps that mirror long-forgotten skies. Someone whispers that tonight they're building the shape of a whale that once swam these waters before warming currents shifted migration patterns. Futurists still argue whether those whales will ever return, whether restoration projects can undo centuries of climate stubbornness. But for now, the glowing lantern whale arches across the air, tail curling, head crowned in light. You lean back on the railing, lantern glow dotting your vision, like a slow-motion fireworks show that forgot the boom. The waves below keep their rhythm, tapping against pontoons, muttering an ocean lullaby that no human composer could improve upon. A drone passes overhead, disguised cleverly as a kite, its job nothing more than recording lantern trajectories for archival. You imagine the archivists later, sipping algae coffee, cataloging lantern shapes. Specimen 482b vaguely resembled an overripe pear, but charming nonetheless. The sea sighs again, and you notice how the city seems to float without protest. Once, people debated if such structures could resist storms. Some engineers predicted collapse, others resilience. You're living in the version where resilience won, though it's fun to imagine the alternate debates, with rival think tanks throwing shade over dinner like, well, my model says the city sinks in week 3, but hey, good luck. And you? You're lucky enough to stroll into this evening. The lanterns keep climbing. The air thickens with light. And slowly the story of the festival begins to settle around you, like a blanket you didn't know you needed. The walkway stretches ahead of you like a dream someone half remembered. Transparent panels of engineered glass sway gently beneath your steps, letting you see the rolling waves just a few meters below. It's not unnerving, it's oddly comforting, like walking on the skin of the ocean itself. Lantern light scatters through the surface, bending into liquid prisms that dance across your shoes. For a moment you think your feet are glowing, but no, it's just the water performing its lazy magic show. Every few steps, tiny vents exhale a breeze from below, designed to keep the walkway from overheating during the day. Tonight, the air is cool, almost theatrical, like the city is practicing its best impression of a summer night in Kyoto. Futurists still argue whether this style of environmental engineering counts as art or infrastructure. You don't care either way. You're too busy admiring how your reflection keeps merging with the reflections of lanterns until you look less like yourself and more like some shimmering extra wandering through a holographic film. On your left, the water folds into canals that snake between modular pods. Families sit along the edges, dangling their feet into the tide, watching lanterns drift above. A boy stretches his arm down with a fishing net, not to catch fish, those are mostly robotic decoys these days, but to scoop up a stray lantern that fell before it learned to hover. He pulls it out, shaking water droplets onto his sister, who shrieks in delight. He pretends the lantern is a prize fish, holding it aloft, and you chuckle quietly at the absurdity. Somewhere, a lantern rescue squad probably exists, though you suspect its main task is filling out insurance claims written in excessively polite language. The walkway tilts ever so slightly, reminding you that the city itself is alive with movement. Underneath, massive ballast tanks inhale and exhale water, keeping the surface level. You imagine them sighing like lungs, breathing so the people above can keep walking without spilling their kelp smoothies. You lean against a rail and picture an alternate future where someone forgot to install the tanks, and whole cities bounce like trampolines whenever storms rolled through. Futurists still argue whether those early prototypes were brilliant experiments or glorified pool toys. Either way, this one clearly won the longevity contest. A cluster of lanterns hovers directly overhead now, their light diffused into shimmering hexagons by the walkway's canopy. The canopy itself is designed to be transparent most nights, but tonight the engineers activated its refractive filters, so each lantern appears multiplied into soft halos. It's like walking under an infinite lantern sky that obeys its own lazy geometry. The filters hum faintly, reminding you of an old fridge. Only this fridge bends light instead of chilling leftovers. You find yourself whispering thank you to it, like it's an old appliance keeping your life together. You pause by a fountain where recycled seawater jets upward in lazy arcs, lit from below by glowing pebbles. The jets don't splash hard. They release water so gently it seems to float back down, each droplet lingering mid-air like it's reluctant to leave. Children lean over the edge, trying to catch droplets on their tongues. Their laughter mingles with the buzz of lanterns drifting overhead. One little girl declares her droplet tastes like mango. You grin, wondering if the water really carries a faint fruit code from past experiments. It wouldn't surprise you. One rumor says a city in the Atlantic once flavored its rainwater to taste faintly of coconut. Futurists still argue whether that was clever branding or reckless meddling. As you keep walking, your path intersects with another bridge. This one arcs high above the waves, so steep it feels almost like a ladder to nowhere. You climb, your steps slow, your breath keeping time with the lanterns ascending beside you. They're like shy companions staying just ahead, as though waiting for you to catch up. At the top, the view spreads open. The sea stretches black and endless, dotted with faint ships in the distance, their navigation lights winking lazily. The city curves outwards in modular rings, each platform stitched to the next, forming something between a necklace and a raft. Lanterns fill the spaces in between, their glow turning the whole city into a shimmering galaxy resting on water. You lean on the highest rail, feeling the faint vibration of turbines beneath your palms. They're powered by tidal energy, steady, predictable, endlessly patient. Somewhere deep in the infrastructure, algorithms choreograph the turbines' dance with the waves. You imagine them gossiping about tides, like co-workers grumbling about a manager. Oh, today's current? Way too pushy. 3 lanterns drift by as if nodding in agreement. Then you notice something stranger. The walkways aren't entirely empty. Small cleaning bots, shaped like stingrays, skim along the glass, polishing away salt crystals. They move with such grace they look like dancers rehearsing choreography. One pauses beside you, hums politely, then flicks its tail before gliding on. You smile, wondering if it expects applause. Maybe in some future contract, bots are owed claps per hour. Futurists still argue whether giving bots personalities is ethical or just clever marketing. Either way, this one definitely deserves an encore. Far below, fish, real ones this time, swirl in artificial reefs tethered to the city's underside. Their scales shimmer with borrowed lantern light, so that even the sea seems decorated for the festival. The reefs are part of ecological compensation programs, designed to encourage species to rebound. You hear someone nearby murmur that schools of sardines now migrate here annually, drawn by the strange cocktail of lights and nutrients. It's an accidental success story. Engineers designed reefs for stability, but fish decided to turn them into dance floors. The walkway eventually slopes downward, guiding you gently toward another district. Lanterns keep following, some brushing so close to the rail you could stretch your fingers and tap them. You resist, partly out of politeness, partly because you suspect the lantern might scold you in a very disappointed AI voice. Better to keep your hands to yourself. The lights keep climbing, the water keeps rolling, and you keep walking, half pedestrian, half stargazer, entirely dreamer. You drift toward the next platform, where a gentle cluster of lantern stalls lines the walkway like sleepy sentinels. The air grows warmer here, tinged with the faint sweetness of toasted rice and something faintly marine, seaweed perhaps, though in this case it's not food but light. Each vendor's stall is a little pocket universe, glowing softly from within, as though each seller has bottled a slice of the sky. You step closer to one of them, intrigued by the shapes on display. These lanterns aren't paper and wire like the ones you remember from childhood festivals. They're alive in a sense. Cultivated strands of engineered seaweed cells curl inside transparent shells, glowing faintly like veins of emerald fire. A vendor, her hair tied back in silver braids that shine almost as brightly as her wares, offers you a nod. She holds up a lantern the size of a grapefruit, tapping it gently with a bamboo stick. It responds by pulsing brighter, like a heart startled awake. Mainstream futurists once predicted that bioluminescent organisms would power entire cities. They weren't entirely wrong. though instead of skyscrapers, it turned out to be lanterns and walkways. Futurists still argue whether this is progress or just a fancy nightlight trend. But tonight, looking around at the vendors' tables, you'd vote firmly for progress. After all, it's hard to fall asleep beneath a skyscraper, but incredibly easy beneath 1,000 glowing jellyfish lanterns. The vendor explains softly, as if you're the only customer in the world, that each lantern is grown slowly, like a tomato on a vine. Some glow in steady colors, others shift hues with the breeze. One special design responds to sound waves, brightening when you hum to it. You test this with a low note, and the lantern answers by flashing blue. The vendor chuckles. That's the karaoke model. Very popular. You laugh, imagining future citizens forming lantern choirs after midnight, each orb warbling along with questionable pitch. Farther down the row, another stall displays lanterns woven from kelp fibers stretched into delicate lattices. These don't glow themselves. They cradle tiny AI chips that project holographic flame, simulating a flicker without risk of fire. The holograms are so convincing, you almost feel the heat. The vendor, noticing your fascination, leans forward conspiratorially. Some buyers still want the old feeling, he whispers, but regulations banned flames centuries ago, so we cheat. You nod, appreciating the honesty. Who doesn't love a good cheat code for nostalgia? Children dart between stalls, waving small lanterns shaped like sea creatures. One boy proudly shows you his lantern dolphin, which squeaks when he taps it. His sister, not to be outdone, activates her lantern octopus, whose tentacles wave dramatically in the air. Their mother rolls her eyes and mutters that she'll be stepping on glowing tentacles in the living room for weeks. You smile, imagining the future version of Legos scattered underfoot, bioluminescent cephalopods lying in wait for unsuspecting parents. A gust of wind flows through the walkway, and the lanterns hanging from vendor awnings sway gently. For a moment, the entire market seems to breathe together, lights rocking in sync with the sea. The sound of fabric rustling mixes with the murmur of voices, and you catch yourself swaying too, as though you've joined a slow-motion dance troupe. At one stall, a holographic display demonstrates the lantern-making process. A projection shows algae spores seeded in nutrient gel, slowly forming into glowing strands. The voiceover explains that each lantern takes 3 weeks to mature, and that artisans sing to them during growth to encourage even light distribution. Futurists still argue whether the singing actually matters, or if it's just cultural theater, but honestly, you prefer the idea of lantern farmers crooning lullabies to their glowing crops. A man at the next table offers you a cup of lantern tea. The drink glows faintly in your hands, infused with bioluminescent proteins harvested from retired lanterns. You hesitate. Does glowing tea count as safe? The vendor assures you it's been filtered of any rebellious traits. You sip, and the flavor is earthy, faintly grassy, with a surprising hint of vanilla. It leaves a subtle warmth in your chest, as though your lungs have just lit up. For a ridiculous second, you imagine yourself joining the lanterns in their slow ascent. Then you hiccup, and the glow fades. You chuckle, realizing you're definitely not made for flight. The stalls grow busier as evening thickens. People lean in, whispering wishes to their chosen lanterns before purchase. That tradition never seems to fade, no matter the century. Buy a lantern, whisper a secret, let it carry your hopes upward. You hear fragments as you pass, someone hoping for calm seas, another for a child's health, another simply asking for better Wi-Fi. The lanterns pulse faintly, as if acknowledging each request, like patient cosmic therapists. You pause at the last stall, where the vendor has arranged lanterns into a miniature skyline. Towers, bridges, even tiny lantern trains glowing softly in a shoebox diorama. You lean close, admiring the detail. One of the towers blinks, as though aware of your attention. The vendor smiles. That's the gossip tower. It lights up when someone nearby thinks something unkind. You laugh nervously and step back. The tower remains dim, thankfully sparing you embarrassment. The market hums around you, vendors calling softly, lanterns flickering, waves sighing beneath. You realize you've been walking slowly, like time itself has stretched. You glance upward again, the sky now speckled with twice as many lanterns as before. Each one a message, a memory, or just a toy, drifting higher into the endless dark. The vendor's glow fades behind you as you move onward, your pockets empty, but your imagination full. And though you bought nothing, you feel strangely rich, as though every lantern winked at you in solidarity, saying, "Don't worry, your wishes are already floating." The music reaches you before you even turn the corner. A low, steady rhythm, like waves tapping a drum, mingling with the higher hum of strings that don't quite belong to any instrument you recognize. You follow the sound and arrive at a wider platform that feels half market, half concert hall. It floats gently, tethered to smaller pods, and every surface seems to glow with the reflection of lanterns bobbing above. Here, the festival's floating kiosks are alive. Imagine food trucks, but instead of wheels, they're rafts, drifting lazily between the walkways. Each one carries not just snacks, but sound. One raft features a trio of musicians with handpans shaped like seashells. Their notes ripple out, blending with the gurgle of water. Another raft hosts an AI choir, voices woven into harmonies so seamless they sound less like singing and more like breathing. You lean on the railing, letting the currents of sound lap against your ears like soft surf. A vendor calls out to you with a smile, offering skewers of grilled kelp. Yes, grilled. Who knew kelp could crisp? You wave politely, saving your appetite for later, but the aroma makes you wonder if seaweed will one day replace popcorn at future cinemas. Futurists still argue whether ocean crops will truly dominate diets or remain a niche curiosity. But here, judging by the happy faces munching away, the kelp lobby clearly won. The kiosks drift closer to one another, creating spontaneous symphonies. A flute line from one raft is echoed by digital chimes from another. A child aboard a third raft bangs joyfully on a drum that looks suspiciously like an upcycled buoy. The rhythm is offbeat, slightly chaotic, but the crowd claps along anyway. You grin. This is music at its most forgiving. Even the mistakes shimmer like lanterns in the air. A scholar standing beside you mutters, half to himself, that the acoustics of floating cities might one day redefine urban soundscapes. Buildings won't echo, waves will, he says, scribbling notes on a waterproof tablet. You imagine future dissertations with titles like On the Harmonic Drift of Kelp-Based Percussion Ensembles. Somewhere in the crowd, a lantern winks approvingly, as though peer-reviewing his thoughts. Your gaze shifts to the edges of the platform where smaller stalls are tethered, selling music-themed lanterns. One lantern flickers in rhythm to the nearest drumbeat. Another projects soft holographic notes that rise with it when released, leaving behind glowing treble clefs that dissolve in the wind. A woman demonstrates a lantern shaped like a cello. When she bows it with her finger, it emits a single deep tone like the sigh of the sea. Her audience giggles, impressed, and several children beg their parents for a lantern cello bedtime toy. You imagine future parents regretting that purchase around 3 a.m. The crowd itself becomes part of the soundscape. People murmur wishes, laugh gently, shuffle their sandals on the planks. A teenager tests out his voice against the AI choir, deliberately singing off-key. Instead of rejecting him, the system adapts, folding his clumsy notes into its harmony like a forgiving friend. You chuckle. This future really is designed to keep egos intact. Imagine karaoke where you can't embarrass yourself no matter how hard you try. The machines won't let you. That's either utopia or the death of comedy. Futurists still argue. As lanterns rise above, they start to pulse in time with the music. You notice the coordination only gradually. First one orb flashing on the beat, then another, until a whole swath of the sky seems to nod in agreement with the rhythm below. A grandmother claps her hands in delight, whispering that the lanterns are dancing. You watch as they weave subtle patterns, lines, arcs, spirals that match the swells of melody. For a second you wonder if this is planned choreography or just emergent behavior. Maybe both. Maybe neither. That's the joy of it. You don't need to know. You sit on a bench carved from driftwood and just listen. The hum of the turbines beneath the city provides a baseline, steady and deep. The waves slap softly against the pontoons, filling the gaps like percussion. Overhead, lanterns flash, turning the air into a glowing equalizer. It's as though the whole environment, sea, sky, light, machines, people, has agreed to play in the same band. Someone offers you a small drink in a shell cup. It fizzes faintly, glowing pale blue, and the server explains it's bubble tea but literally bubbles. You take a sip, and tiny globes of sweetness pop against your tongue, some flavored like lychee, others like something you can't quite name but suspect is engineered nostalgia. You laugh quietly to yourself, thinking how future food designers probably had to invent missing childhood memories as flavor notes. Somewhere in a lab, a scientist is very proud of that. The kiosks begin to drift apart, letting the music taper naturally. The crowd claps softly, not the raucous applause of a stadium, but the gentle acknowledgement of people who know more lanterns and more music await in the night. You rise, stretching, and glance back one more time. The musicians still play, the choir still hums, and the lanterns still pulse overhead. For them, there's no beginning or ending, only the ongoing tide of sound. You continue along the walkway, ears still ringing faintly with borrowed melodies, eyes adjusting again to the endless scatter of light. Somewhere ahead, a family prepares to launch their lanterns into the salted wind, and you realize the night's rhythm isn't confined to music. It flows through every lantern, every laugh, every step you take on this drifting city. You pause where the walkway widens into a circular plaza. The air feels different here, more anticipatory, like a breath held before release. Families and travelers cluster in small groups, clutching their chosen lanterns close to their chests. Each orb glows with a nervous energy, as though eager to be let go. The sea lies open beyond the railing, waiting with the patience of an old storyteller. A boy tugs at his grandmother's sleeve. She bends low, holding the lantern steady, while he whispers something inaudible into its glowing core. She kisses his forehead. Then together they lift it, palms upward, as if offering a gift to the sky. The lantern hesitates, hovering uncertainly, then finds its buoyancy and begins its climb. The boy cheers, the grandmother smiles, and the crowd around them softens as though each person has released a weight of their own. You stand near another family preparing their launch. Their lanterns are clustered in a wooden crate, wrapped in woven seagrass. The father distributes them like slices of cake, one to each child, one to his partner, one kept for himself. He explains gently that each lantern should carry a thought of gratitude, not just a wish. His youngest daughter frowns, clearly trying to recall something to be thankful for. At last she declares, "I'm thankful my shoes light up when I stomp." The family laughs, and the lantern she holds flickers approvingly. Futurists still argue whether gratitude is more powerful than hope, but you're convinced that in this city, glowing sneakers probably count as both. Above you, the first wave of lanterns climbs higher. They gather like shy stars, forming constellations that don't yet make sense. You notice how the lanterns move in clusters, never entirely alone, as though they prefer company. Perhaps it's coded into their AI, or perhaps it's simply physics. Currents of air nudging them together. Either way, the effect is deeply human, lanterns drifting as families drift. A group of travelers beside you debate how high the lanterns will go. One insists they're programmed to dissolve after 5 kilometers, releasing biodegradable spores into the upper atmosphere. Another swears he read that some lanterns are collected by drones and archived in museums. Futurists still argue over the ethics of disposal versus preservation, but here, under the night sky, it feels irrelevant. What matters is the climb, not the destination. The sound of release fills the plaza, the soft sigh of lanterns slipping from hands, the delighted gasps of children, the murmured prayers of elders. It creates a rhythm you hadn't noticed before, a kind of heartbeat of the festival. You find yourself matching your breathing to it. Inhale as lanterns rise. Exhale as the crowd cheers. One lantern catches your eye. It's larger than the others, shaped like a lotus bloom, each petal glowing faintly pink. As it ascends, the petals open wider until the entire lantern resembles a flower blooming mid-air. The crowd collectively murmurs in awe. Someone jokes that the lantern is showing off. You smile. It is. Lanterns, like people, sometimes crave the spotlight. You watch as another family prepares their launch. They've decorated their lantern with painted waves and tiny fish. Before releasing it, they gather close, heads bowed. You catch fragments of their whispers, stories of grandparents who once lived on islands long since submerged. When they let go, the lantern lifts slowly, almost reluctantly, as though carrying memories heavier than its frame. Yet it rises, steady and proud, joining the others above. The plaza grows brighter with each launch. Lanterns of green, gold, violet, and blue weave into a patchwork sky. The sea below reflects them, doubling the effect, so that it feels as if you're standing in the middle of a galaxy with no edges. An older man next to you chuckles softly. He explains that, in his youth, lanterns were little more than candles in paper shells, easily blown out, often polluting rivers. "Now look at them," he says, gesturing upward. "They float higher than satellites and cleaner than saints." You laugh with him, though you can't decide which is the more impressive metric. A gust of wind rushes through the plaza, and several lanterns wobble dangerously. The crowd gasps, but the lanterns steady themselves, adjusting with hidden gyroscopes. A child claps. They can dance. You grin, imagining lantern engineers deliberately programming a little wobble just to keep audiences entertained. Futurists still argue whether lanterns should be purely functional or whimsically interactive, but tonight, the wobble wins. Finally, you decide it's your turn. A vendor offers you a lantern, small and unassuming, glowing pale blue like a quiet thought. You hold it in both hands. It feels cool, almost like holding a snowball made of light. You lean close, whispering something you didn't realize you wanted to say. A thank you, a hope, a sigh. Then you open your hands. The lantern pauses just for a heartbeat, before it drifts upward. It joins the crowd above, finding its place among the others. You follow it with your eyes until it's indistinguishable from the hundreds of tiny stars already climbing. Somewhere deep in your chest, you feel a release you hadn't expected. The plaza continues its rhythm, lanterns rising, families laughing, the sea murmuring. You linger a moment longer, basking in the glow, before turning toward the next walkway. The night is still young and the sky has room for countless more lights. The walkway narrows again, then expands into a long corridor strung with banners. Each one ripples in the ocean breeze, painted with symbols that are half ancient, half futuristic, swirls of calligraphy blended with geometric star maps. You step forward, following the slow tide of festival-goers as they move toward the grand procession. Ahead, lanterns are already being guided into formation. Small drones hidden inside hollow bamboo tubes buzz gently, nudging the orbs into precise positions. The sky becomes a canvas and lanterns, the brushstrokes. A hush falls over the crowd as the first constellation takes shape. Orion, but not as you know it. His bow arcs wider, his belt studded with extra stars, as if time itself has given him a wardrobe upgrade. Futurists still argue whether constellations should remain classic or evolve with new stellar discoveries, but tonight nobody complains. The sky is alive with invention. You watch as more lanterns rise, pulled gently by encoded coordinates. They cluster, shift, and settle, forming mythic animals that once guided sailors: a phoenix blazing in soft crimson, a turtle glowing emerald, a carp leaping upward in gold. Children squeal in delight, pointing skyward as if these shapes are real, swimming through the heavens. Parents nod with quiet pride, whispering legends their own grandparents told them, only now the stories are alive above their heads. Near you, a group of scholars debates whether these new constellations count as folk astronomy. One insists they are merely art installations with a short lifespan. Another argues they carry cultural memory just as much as the constellations ancient Greeks or Polynesians charted. You sip the last of your bubble tea from earlier and think both sides are missing the point. You're watching light invent new mythology in real time, and the sky itself seems in on the joke. A series of drums begins to pulse from the plaza behind you. Each beat sends a ripple through the lanterns, triggering synchronized shifts in formation. Now they spell out patterns that look almost like script, slow messages written across the heavens. One phrase emerges: "May your dreams float." The crowd applauds, and you can't help but smirk. Somewhere, an AI poet is cashing a paycheck for that line. Futurists still argue whether machines can write true poetry, but at least this one knows how to keep a crowd entertained. The procession begins in earnest. A line of performers enters the walkway, dressed in robes woven with fiber optic threads. As they move, their garments shift from indigo to silver, mirroring the lanterns overhead. They carry staffs tipped with miniature lights, twirling them lazily so that streaks of brightness trail behind. The effect is hypnotic. Humans mirroring lanterns, lanterns mirroring stars, everything looping endlessly until you forget which is the imitation. You fall in step with the procession, swept along by its calm momentum. The air hums faintly, as if vibrating with the rhythm of thousands of lanterns floating overhead. One performer winks at you as she passes, spinning her staff in a perfect spiral. You grin, feeling like an extra in a sci-fi ballet. Somewhere in another life, maybe you are. As the path curves, the constellations above shift again. This time they form futuristic star charts, maps of colonies yet to exist, planets where humanity might one day build cities. You recognize Mars instantly, its two moons glowing faintly beside it. Next comes Europa, glowing icy blue, a suggestion of oceans beneath its crust. Then, more exotic, Kepler 452b, projected in amber, its lantern continents drawn from speculation. Futurists still argue whether interstellar colonization is viable or just romantic daydreaming, but here, in lantern form, the idea is soothing rather than daunting. A child on her father's shoulders points upward at Mars and shouts, "That's where I'll live." The crowd chuckles and her father nods as if the matter is settled. You smile. It's exactly the kind of ambition lanterns are made to carry. The procession halts briefly, allowing the constellations above to reconfigure once more. This time, the lanterns form something stranger, not stars or planets, but maps of the city itself, laid out in glowing lines. The floating neighborhoods shine in miniature, lanterns tracing walkways, plazas, and rafts. For a dizzying moment, you're standing inside a living map, seeing yourself both as participant and dot of light on the page. The effect is uncanny yet comforting, like being reminded you belong to a larger design. As the performers bow, the crowd exhales together. Lanterns scatter again, drifting into free-form patterns, their work as cosmic cartographers complete for now. You follow the flow of people, the music softening, the air thick with both salt and satisfaction. Overhead, the whale-shaped constellation from earlier still lingers, glowing faintly. It arcs across the sky, tail dipping toward the sea, as if reminding you the night is far from over and the lanterns have more stories to tell. The procession dissolves into smaller streams of people, and you find yourself guided toward a quieter district. The sound of drums fades, replaced by the gentle clatter of bowls and the low hum of conversation. Before you stretches a broad platform lined with long communal tables, no chairs, just cushioned mats woven from kelp fibers. Lanterns dangle overhead in neat rows, glowing softly enough to make every dish glisten. This is the realm of the floating kitchens, where dinner is less of a meal and more of a slow ceremony. You settle onto a mat at the nearest table. A server in a robe patterned with silver waves offers you a small cup of steaming kelp tea. The liquid is green, but not the aggressive green of spinach juice. It's muted, like watercolor brushed onto rice paper. You sip, and it tastes earthy, almost nutty, with an aftertaste of salt that reminds you exactly where you are, afloat, at the mercy of tides. Futurists still argue whether kelp will ever truly rival coffee or wine as a global staple, but tonight it feels like the only drink you'll ever need. Plates begin to appear. Some are carried by human servers, others by small drone trays hovering politely at shoulder height. A bowl of translucent noodles slides toward you. They shimmer faintly in the lantern light, and when you lift one with your chopsticks, it stretches like a strand of liquid glass. A neighbor leans over and explains that these noodles are made from deep-sea algae, engineered to grow faster than wheat. One day, she says, they'll feed half the world. You nod, imagining school cafeterias centuries from now, slurping glowing noodles as casually as kids today bite into pizza. Beside you, a family laughs as they unwrap parcels of fermented lotus leaves. Inside are sticky rice cakes, dotted with mango, preserved to taste exactly like fruit from centuries past. The father explains it's a specialty meant to remind festival-goers of the islands that once dotted this part of the Pacific, long before rising seas claimed them. Futurists still argue whether floating cities erase history or preserve it, but in this moment you taste the past disguised as dessert. The lanterns overhead flicker in lazy patterns, some pulse with each gust of wind, others shimmer in time with the laughter around the table. A server sets down a plate of dumplings shaped like tiny lanterns. You bite into one and broth spills out, ginger, garlic, seaweed, and something faintly sweet. The dumpling glows faintly from within, as though determined to match the decorations above. You chuckle. Foodie Instagram is going to have a meltdown, you whisper, though nobody here seems interested in documenting anything. They just eat, sip, and sigh, letting the festival carry them. From a platform nearby, a cook demonstrates how lantern light is used in food preparation. He places raw slices of fish beneath a cluster of lanterns, tuned to a high-frequency glow. Within minutes, the light gently sears the surface without heat, a process called photonic curing. Futurists still argue whether this counts as true cooking or just edible science, but the result, sashimi that glimmers like starlight, proves delicious either way. You chew slowly, amused at the idea of lanterns pulling double duty as both decoration and kitchen appliance. Conversation at the table drifts lazily. Someone shares a story about a lantern that refused to ascend until bribed with a song. Another jokes that lanterns are secretly rating everyone's wishes, sending the best to the stars and recycling the rest into cosmic spam mail. The table roars with laughter, and you join in, nearly spilling your tea. You imagine lanterns huddled in some celestial back office, groaning about inbox overload. After the laughter fades, the rhythm of dinner resumes. Dishes are cleared, replaced with desserts, candied sea grapes, lotus seed custard, and a pudding that glows faintly blue. You take a spoonful, half expecting your tongue to start shining, but instead it melts into a cool sweetness, like vanilla stirred with saltwater taffy. You sigh happily and lean back, lantern glow dotting your eyelids as you close them briefly. The hum of conversation blends with the ambient sounds, waves tapping the pontoons, turbines sighing, lanterns rustling in the breeze. For a moment, the city feels less like a construction and more like a giant dinner table adrift in the cosmos. You picture satellites overhead looking down, confused to see a patch of ocean glowing like a candlelit feast. Futurists still argue whether Earth's orbit should be cluttered with observation drones, but tonight you imagine them simply envious, wishing they too could join the banquet. As you finish the last sip of tea, a server clears your cup with a bow. You rise from the mat, stretching, your stomach warm and your head slightly lighter than before. The lanterns above seem to approve, flickering softly as if to say, "Well done, you've dined properly." You smile, stepping back onto the walkway, the festival unfolding ahead in all its slow, glowing grandeur. From the calm rhythm of dinner, you drift toward a district where laughter runs sharper, higher, like bells ringing across the tide. You follow the sound and find yourself on a broad platform sloping gently into the water. Here the children of the tide run barefoot, their ankles splashing in shallow pools engineered to rise and fall with the rhythm of the waves. The lanterns here aren't just drifting skyward, they're tethered by thin, almost invisible threads that shimmer like spider silk. At the other end of each thread swims a robotic fish, designed to tug the lantern kites across the water. The effect is surreal, glowing orbs swooping low over the shallows, darting like playful stars just above the sea's skin. The children chase them, squealing, tugging their own strings, steering the lanterns as though flying kites made of light. You lean on the railing, mesmerized. A boy dashes past, his lantern shaped like a turtle. He laughs when it dives too close to the water, then tugs the thread to make it climb again. His friend's lantern resembles a phoenix, its wings projected holographically, flickering with every splash. The two duel briefly, phoenix diving, turtle dodging, until both collapse in giggles, splashing the onlookers in salty spray. You step back, narrowly avoiding a wet sandal slap against your shins. Mainstream projections once imagined play in the future would be entirely virtual. Headsets, simulations, the disembodied thrill of pixels. Futurists still argue whether physical games are obsolete in a world saturated with VR. But here, the joy is tactile, messy, damp. The children aren't plugged into anything but tide and laughter. You smile, grateful for this stubborn refusal of reality to surrender all fun to the digital. One little girl holds her lantern string taut, staring up at the orb hovering above her. It's shaped like a jellyfish, its tendrils of light trailing in the dark. She whispers something to it, maybe a secret, maybe an order. The lantern pulses pink in reply, then loops in a slow circle. She claps her hands in delight, declaring she and her lantern are now best friends. You chuckle softly, wondering if she'll still think so when it tangles itself around a lamppost later tonight. Robotic fish dart below the surface, their scales designed to refract lantern light. You spot one shaped like a carp, glinting gold whenever it turns. Another, a silver shark, zips past too quickly for its handler to keep up. A boy skids after it, nearly tumbling into the pool, saved only by his sister grabbing the back of his shirt. Their mother laughs, shaking her head, as though this chaos is the most natural part of the evening. A team of older children competes in a game where they choreograph lantern movements into shapes. One group forms a glowing spiral, another arranges theirs into a heart that pulses in rhythm. Judges, clearly self-appointed, because who else would want the job, declare winners with exaggerated seriousness. A lantern shaped like a squid is crowned champion, mostly because it sprayed mist at the spectators when no one was expecting it. You grin. Somewhere, A designer gave that lantern a mischievous subroutine, and it's paying off beautifully. As you wander closer, a young boy tugs your sleeve, thrusting his spare lantern string into your hand. You hesitate, then take it. The lantern is a modest sphere, glowing pale blue. Below, a robotic koi tugs the line. You give it a cautious flick, and the lantern swoops low, skimming the water before rising again. The boy cheers and pats your arm, delighted by your rookie success. You feel absurdly proud of yourself, like you've just been promoted to honorary child. The lantern drifts higher, and you imagine releasing it completely, letting it rise into the growing sky constellation. But the koi tugs back, reminding you of the tether. You laugh quietly. Maybe adulthood is exactly this, pretending you're in charge while invisible strings pull the real weight. Futurists still argue whether childhood will exist at all in centuries ahead, whether engineered education will replace play. But watching these kids, soaked and wild with joy, you'd bet heavily on the survival of silliness. Eventually, you hand the string back to its rightful owner. The boy beams, then runs off, his lantern soaring with renewed energy. You watch him disappear into the splashing chaos. As the games wind down, the robotic fish begin to herd themselves into gentle schools, carrying their lanterns into neat lines along the water's edge. The crowd claps politely, as though applauding the fish for good manners. Overhead, free lanterns continue to rise, ignoring the boundaries, drifting into the wide darkness where only stars can keep them company. You step back from the pools, brushing salt spray off your sleeves. Behind you, the walkway glows faintly, leading toward the next corner of the festival. Children keep laughing, fish keep tugging, lanterns keep glowing, and you, still smiling, let the tide of sound push you forward. The laughter of children fades behind you as you follow a narrow passageway, where the din of splashing water gives way to hushed voices and careful footsteps. Lanterns here don't dart or wobble. They hang still, their light steady, patient, as if holding their breath. Signs point toward the lantern archives, and curiosity tugs you forward. You arrive at a low circular chamber, half above the waterline and half below. Its walls are transparent, revealing the ocean beyond, where fish glide lazily through beams of lantern glow that leak into the sea. Inside, rows of tall shelves curve like ribs, each lined not with books, but with crystalline capsules. Within each capsule flickers the image of a lantern from years past, preserved in holographic detail. An archivist approaches, their robe woven from threads that glimmer faintly like scales. They carry a tablet and a stylus shaped like a reed. With a nod, they explain that every lantern released during the festival is scanned, recorded, and stored in these ledgers. Each design, each color shift, each quirky wobble is cataloged like an entry in a living encyclopedia of light. No two lanterns are ever the same, the archivist says, voice soft but proud. So we keep them all. You lean closer to one capsule. Inside, a lantern shaped like a dragonfly hovers, frozen mid-flap. Another shelf displays a lantern that resembles an ancient sailing ship, sails glowing faintly gold. Each flicker, each shimmer is recorded. The archivist explains that this isn't just about memory. Researchers study lantern flight paths, color choices, even whispered wishes. Futurists still argue whether it's ethical to analyze private hopes, but the archivist shrugs. Better to remember everything than lose it. A child tugs their parent's hand nearby, pointing at a hologram of a lantern shaped like a cat. "That one's funny," she exclaims. The archivist kneels, smiling. Yes, it belonged to a little boy who wanted to remind the stars to take care of his pet. The girl giggles, reassured that even cosmic archives have room for cats. You chuckle, because of course they do. It wouldn't be a real record of humanity without an overload of cat content. As you walk deeper, the shelves curve endlessly, each lined with light. It feels less like an archive and more like a galaxy you can stroll through. You pause at one display labeled Lantern 7285B, the lantern that refused to ascend. Inside, the hologram shows a small, stubborn orb pulsing red at ground level. You grin, imagining some poor family coaxing it, singing lullabies, bribing it with snacks. The archivist admits that lantern still puzzles researchers. No mechanical flaw was ever found. Sometimes, they say with a shrug, lanterns just say no. Futurists still argue whether this was a glitch or a spark of personality. You, privately, prefer the second option. In a central alcove, a massive holographic table displays statistics of the current festival. You watch dots of light scatter upward, each representing a lantern in flight. Labels mark their families, their launch times, their trajectories. Some dots cluster into constellations, others wander free like shy rebels. The archivist traces one line with their stylus. This one belongs to a couple who releases the same design every year, they explain. We've tracked its siblings for 5 decades. You marvel at the persistence. What started as a single glowing wish has become a tradition stitched into data. A group of apprentices sit at desks nearby, sketching lanterns onto scrolls, their strokes fluid and patient. One leans back, sighing that AI programs could record all this instantly. Another shakes her head, insisting that human hands must stay part of the memory. Futurists still argue whether manual record-keeping is nostalgic indulgence or cultural necessity. But as you watch their brushes leave delicate arcs of ink, you side firmly with nostalgia. The imperfections make the records human. The archivist guides you to a final alcove, a darkened pool where retired lanterns float in silence. Their light has dimmed, but they remain buoyant, bobbing softly like old stars resting after long journeys. You kneel at the edge, peering into the water. Reflections of your face mingle with theirs, as though you too are being catalogued into the great ledger of light. You rise slowly, feeling heavier than when you entered. Not weighed down exactly, but expanded, as though you've borrowed thousands of tiny memories for a moment. The archivist bows slightly, murmuring, "Every lantern tells a story. Now you are part of them." You nod, whisper a thank you, and step back onto the walkway. Above, fresh lanterns continue their climb, bright and alive. But you carry a new awareness. Even the smallest glow tonight will live forever in some shelf, some ledger, some future debate. And that thought, oddly enough, makes the night feel even more endless. You emerge from the hush of the archives into air that feels looser, less scripted. The walkway broadens again, curving toward a cluster of tall masts that rise from the city's edge. At first glance, they look like remnants of ships, but then you notice the lanterns, hundreds of them, woven into nets strung between the poles. The whole structure sways gently with the tide, and as it moves, the lanterns clink faintly against one another, releasing a music so delicate you almost mistake it for wind chimes. You wander closer, drawn by the sound. Each mast is wrapped in lines of rope, and on those ropes hang lanterns of different shapes, spheres, cones, spirals, even one resembling a giant seashell. When the breeze brushes them, they shift and hum, a choir of light and tone. No two lanterns sound the same. Some ring high, like crystal glasses tapped with silver spoons. Others murmur low, like bamboo flutes buried in the sand. Futurists still argue whether these sounds are random resonance or intentional engineering. But your ears can't tell the difference. They're simply beautiful. A caretaker stands nearby, leaning against a mast. He's elderly, with hands weathered like driftwood, and he taps the ropes occasionally, adjusting tension the way a musician tunes strings. They call this rigging the wind songs, he explains, noticing your curiosity. Each lantern is tuned to a note. Together they play the weather. You smile, glancing upward as the breeze shifts. Sure enough, the pitch changes, flowing from a lazy lullaby to something brisker, brighter, as the wind gains strength. Children run beneath the masts, laughing as they try to guess which lantern will sing next. One boy cups his hands to his mouth and blows upward, creating a puff of air that rattles a cluster of lanterns. His friends clap at the result, then take turns improvising their own gusts. You chuckle at their inventiveness. Humanity never misses a chance to remix nature into play. Somewhere, perhaps, a futurist would argue that this is the purest form of music, not composed, not performed, but coaxed out of the elements like a secret. You step closer to the ropes and place your palm against one. The vibration is subtle, a soft hum you feel more than hear, like the purr of a cat resting on your chest. The sound travels through your skin, into your bones, until your breath naturally slows to match. You think briefly of ancient wind harps strung on mountain passes, instruments that played without human hands. Now, centuries later, the tradition has drifted out to sea, woven into lantern festivals where the sky itself becomes the instrument. Above, a particularly strong gust sends the entire rigging into a shimmer of sound. Dozens of lanterns sway in unison, their glow flickering as if laughing. The tones overlap, creating harmony so rich you close your eyes, half convinced you've wandered into a cathedral built from light and wind. When you open them again, the stars above seem brighter, as if the lanterns have pulled them closer just for this performance. Near you, a group of engineers debate whether the lantern rigging could one day generate energy as well as music. Tiny piezoelectric cells capturing vibrations, feeding power back into the city. One insists it's practical, another scoffs, calling it romantic nonsense. Futurists still argue whether beauty should have utility, but as you listen to the wind songs, you lean firmly toward beauty. Sometimes the purpose of light is simply to glow, and the purpose of sound is simply to soothe. The caretaker begins a slow walk along the masts, tapping lanterns gently with a wooden stick. Each tap produces a note, and soon he's coaxing a melody from the rigging. Simple, repetitive, almost hypnotic. The children fall silent, mesmerized. You stand still, letting the tune wash over you, surprised at how quickly it blurs the edges of thought. A joke sneaks into your mind, uninvited. Imagine the lanterns demanding royalties for every performance. "Excuse me, sir, but that was my C-sharp. Please deposit a credit into my light fund." You stifle a laugh, not wanting to disturb the reverence of the moment. Still, the idea lingers. Lantern unions, negotiating fair treatment for overworked orbs. As the melody fades, the caretaker bows slightly to the audience. The wind picks up again, reclaiming the instrument. The lanterns sway and hum, returning to their own improvisation. You exhale, realizing you've been holding your breath, caught in their spell. The walkway beckons you onward, but you linger a moment longer, palms resting against the rope, ears tuned to the whispers of light and breeze. Eventually, though, you step back, leaving the wind songs to their endless rehearsal. The night stretches ahead, filled with more lanterns, more stories, more debates yet to be overheard. But this corner of the city lingers with you, a reminder that sometimes the simplest materials, rope, air, light, can weave a symphony more lasting than any orchestra. You leave the swaying rigging behind, and the path narrows into a quiet causeway where lanterns are strung low and close to the water. Here the festival feels less like a performance and more like a memory whispered into the dark. You step slowly, noticing that each lantern glows with painted images, their surfaces transformed into miniature story panels. The first one you pass shows a village hut, roof of palm leaves perched above clear shallows. A fishing boat rests nearby, painted in careful strokes. The caption beneath reads, "Tuvalu, before the waters." You pause, feeling a tug in your chest. These lanterns are memorials, bridges of cultural memory, Each one carries the story of an island that once rose proudly from the Pacific, now surrendered to the sea. A family gathers beside another lantern. It glows with images of coconut trees and children playing in white sand. The grandfather leans down, tracing the lantern's lines with a trembling finger. He whispers to his granddaughter about the island where he was born, describing the taste of mangoes sweeter than anything grown in hydroponic domes. The girl listens wide-eyed, as if the lantern itself is telling the tale. Futurists still argue whether floating cities erase heritage or preserve it, but in this moment the glow of memory is undeniable. You continue slowly, lantern by lantern. Some depict festivals, dancers in grass skirts, musicians pounding drums under sunlit skies. Others show storms, the towering waves that swallowed homes, the winds that carried roofs into the sea. These lanterns flicker more solemnly, their light a soft mourning. You reach one painted with nothing but a horizon line, blank and endless. A plaque beneath explains, Kiribati, remembered. The simplicity hits harder than any elaborate scene. As you walk, you hear snippets of conversation. A young man insists that reconstructing old islands digitally is enough, that VR archives can preserve culture. His aunt shakes her head, replying, "It is not enough to see. You must feel it in the air, taste it on your tongue." Futurists still argue about what authenticity means, but here the lanterns themselves seem to take sides. They breathe salt into the air, whisper mango sweetness into memory. Children run past, slowing only when they notice the solemn glow of certain lanterns. One boy asks his mother why the lantern shows people standing waist-deep in water. She kneels, explaining softly that the sea is both friend and thief, and the lanterns are how they keep the stolen pieces close. The boy nods, more solemn than a child should be, and holds her hand tightly. A musician sits at the walkway's edge, playing a slow tune on a bamboo flute. His notes weave gently between the lanterns, as though coaxing the stories upward. One lantern flickers brighter in time with the melody, its painted figures almost dancing. You smile faintly, wondering if lanterns really do respond to memory, or if your sleepy brain is stitching patterns where none exist. Either way, the effect soothes you. You pause at one lantern painted with a myth, a great canoe carrying ancestors across endless waters, guided by stars. The image feels timeless, bridging centuries of voyaging, from wooden outriggers to floating megacities. Futurists still argue whether humanity's destiny is land, sea, or space, but the lantern seems to say, perhaps it has always been journey, not destination. The walkway ends at a small plaza where dozens of these memorial lanterns cluster together. Their collective glow is warmer, heavier, carrying more than simple festivity. People sit on mats, bowing their heads, whispering prayers or songs. Some hold hands, others sit alone, staring upward as if searching for the islands in the stars. You step softly among them, a respectful guest in their circle of light. One lantern catches your eye. It shows not an island, but a face, painted in broad, confident strokes. The plaque reads simply, "To all unnamed." The lantern pulses steadily, a heartbeat for those who vanished nameless, swept away by waves and time. You linger, throat tight, then bow your head briefly, feeling the gravity of remembrance settle into your bones. Eventually, you step away, the sea lapping gently beneath the planks, lantern glow trailing after you. Behind, the plaza continues its vigil, soft voices blending with the endless hiss of tide. Ahead, brighter laughter awaits, but you carry with you the hush of stories, painted in light, preserved against forgetting. The walkway carries you onward, curving away from the solemn hush of remembrance into a pocket of surprising intimacy. The air here smells of steam and flowers, the scent tugging you forward before you even see the source. You arrive at a raft-like garden, its surface covered in low platforms of wood and woven reed gently bobbing in the tide. Lanterns bloom among the greenery like luminous blossoms, some hung on bamboo poles, others floating in shallow pools where lotus flowers spread their wide leaves. You're invited to sit on a cushion beneath a pergola draped in vines. A woman in a jade-green tunic sets a clay pot before you, steam curling upward. She pours into a cup carved from polished shell, and the liquid glows faintly pink. Lotus brew, she explains, steeped at sunrise, served at lantern rise. You lift the cup and sip cautiously. The tea tastes floral but grounding, with a sweetness that lingers longer than expected, like honey hidden under layers of silk. Around you, others sip in silence, their lantern-lit faces serene. Some lean back, eyes closed, letting the steam curl around them. Others talk quietly, trading stories that sound less like conversations and more like old folk tales unspooling in the humid air. Futurists still argue whether communal rituals like tea drinking will survive in hyper-technological societies, but here, amid floating gardens and glowing lanterns, the ritual feels timeless, anchored beyond debate. You wander between the rafts after finishing your tea. Narrow bridges of bamboo connect one garden patch to another, swaying gently. On one raft, tiny citrus trees grow in neat rows, their fruits glowing faintly, not naturally, but because lanterns are strung among the branches. The effect is magical. Every orange and lime looks like a miniature star. You overhear someone joke that the trees photosynthesize gossip as well as light, which explains why the fruits taste so tart. You smile, appreciating how future humor manages to be both nerdy and childlike. In another corner, a man kneels among lotus flowers, tending them with quiet devotion. He explains to a passerby that the lotus here are engineered to open at night, their petals timed with the lanterns. The blooms glow faintly from within, bioluminescent veins tracing their edges. The flowers don't just mirror the lanterns, he says softly. They remember them. Futurists still argue whether plants can truly hold memory, but you look at the glowing petals and feel tempted to believe. A group of friends sits cross-legged on a raft, playing a game with lantern petals. Each person whispers a wish, then folds a petal carefully and sets it afloat in a basin of water. The petals glow faintly, drifting together, colliding gently like bumper boats of hope. When two wishes bump, the group bursts into laughter, teasing the wishers about secret romances or rival dreams. One boy mutters that his petal only wished for more dumplings. His friends groan in mock despair, accusing him of wasting cosmic bandwidth. You stop by a stall where artisans craft lanterns shaped like teacups. Each one glows from within, casting a soft halo onto the raft. The artisan explains that some families launch them as offerings. Lanterns of tea for ancestors, lanterns of tea for gods, lanterns of tea for the sea itself. Everything drinks, she says with a shrug. You nod, amused and oddly touched. Somewhere in your mind, an image lingers. The ocean itself sipping from a glowing cup, sighing in appreciation. The rafts shift slightly as a boat passes, its lanterns reflected in the tea pools. You steady yourself, gripping a bamboo rail. The movement doesn't disturb the calm, it simply reminds you that even stillness here is fluid, part of the tide's larger rhythm. The thought feels soothing, like rocking in a cradle you didn't realize you'd been missing. Another cup of tea is pressed into your hands before you leave, this time infused with ginger. The warmth spreads through you, seeping into your bones. As you sip, lanterns above sway in the breeze, casting dappled shadows across the leaves. For a moment, the world narrows to taste and light, and the faint hum of voices. No rush, no deadline, no algorithm. Just tea, lanterns, and the tide. When you finish, you place the cup on a wooden tray. The server bows, lantern light catching the curve of her smile. You return the gesture before stepping onto the bridge that leads you back toward the main walkway. Behind you, the rafts continue to glow, their lanterns rising like blossoms into the night sky, carrying steam, memory, and laughter with them. You step off the garden rafts and find yourself in a narrower passage. Here the air changes again, cooler, stiller, more secretive. The walkway twists between tall walls of woven bamboo, creating a maze-like alley. Lanterns hang close overhead, strung in single-file rows, each glowing in a distinct shade: cobalt, amber, vermilion, jade. Their light falls in bands across your face, painting you in shifting colors with every step. Unlike the open plazas and feasting rafts, this place whispers. People move quietly, their footsteps softened by mats laid over the planks. They stop at certain corners, tilt their heads up at a particular lantern, then murmur words only the color can hear. You realize slowly that each hue carries its own meaning, an old language, remembered only by those who grew up with it. One shade might signal forgiveness, another remembrance, another unspoken longing. A man pauses beneath a lantern, glowing deep violet. He touches his forehead gently, whispers a few syllables, then bows. His daughter tugs at his sleeve, asking what he said. He smiles and shakes his head. "You'll learn when you're older." She frowns but accepts it, pressing her small palms together as if to imitate him. Futurists still argue whether such codes count as cultural preservation or mere nostalgia, but as you watch the lantern shift its glow in answer, you feel the code is alive, not relic. You keep walking. A woman in her 20s kneels before a lantern, burning a sharp green. Her lips move quickly, almost desperately. When she finishes, the lantern brightens for an instant, then dims. She exhales in relief, as if the light itself has forgiven her. You move on quietly, respecting her privacy, but the sight lingers, a conversation without words, carried in photons and memory. At a bend in the alley, you spot a group of teenagers whispering among themselves. One dares another to speak beneath the crimson lantern, rumored to reveal secrets. He laughs nervously, then steps up, mutters something, and the lantern flares bright red, casting his blush across the alley. His friends howl with laughter, chasing him down the corridor. You grin, glad to see even sacred codes can double as playground dares. Perhaps that's the truest sign of cultural health, when rituals survive teenagers. You pause beneath a lantern, glowing pale silver. Its light is softer than the others, almost moon-like. You feel an impulse to whisper something, but hesitate. What would you say? A confession? A memory? A joke? Finally you murmur, "Thanks for letting me walk here." The lantern brightens just slightly, like a nod. You chuckle softly to yourself. Somewhere, a lantern AI programmer is probably smirking, knowing how easily humans interpret feedback as intimacy. Futurists still argue whether machines can genuinely listen, but in alleys like this, the debate doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling. The corridor bends again, narrowing until you're almost brushing both walls. Lanterns hang lower now, so close you could touch them, but nobody does. The silence deepens, broken only by the creak of bamboo and the occasional sigh of waves beneath. Ahead you spot an elder sitting cross-legged, eyes closed. She hums softly, not words but tones, matching the lanterns overhead. One by one, they brighten and dim with her rhythm. She is, in a sense, playing them like an organ. Passers-by bow their heads as they walk by, acknowledging her quiet mastery. You linger a moment, enchanted, before moving on. Finally, the corridor opens back onto the wider festival. The sudden brightness of dozens of free-floating lanterns almost startles you after the coded dimness. Behind you, the whispering alley remains, a secret tucked into the city's spine. Ahead lies noise and music again, but you carry the memory of hushed colors with you, the knowledge that some conversations can only be had in light. The hush of the whispering corridors fades as the walkway widens again, and soon you smell the river before you see it, brackish, heavy, tinged with the faint sweetness of lantern wax and grilled fruit drifting downstream. Then the view opens, a wide channel carved through the floating city, broad enough to carry barges. And there it is, the lantern barge itself, moving so slowly it seems to glide more than sail, its hull a dark silhouette beneath an avalanche of light. You step closer to the railing as the barge passes. Thousands of lanterns cover every surface, layered like scales on a dragon. They sway with the current, glowing in 100 hues. Some are tethered tightly to the rigging, others dangle on long ropes, brushing the water, trailing lines of luminous ripples. The barge hums with a low motor, but the sound is nearly swallowed by the collective murmur of people gathered on the banks. Families step forward to add their own lanterns to the vessel. Volunteers dressed in flowing robes help secure them, tying knots with practiced fingers, sliding them into gaps among the glowing mass. Each addition feels ceremonial, like pinning stars to a fabric sky. You watch a little boy lift his lantern high with both hands. A volunteer takes it, fastens it carefully, and the boy claps when he sees his glow join the barge's constellation. Futurists still argue whether rituals gain or lose meaning when scaled to thousands of participants, but here, in the soft light of a child's grin, the answer feels obvious. The barge itself is built like an arc, broad and flat, its decks wide enough for small groups to climb aboard. You notice a narrow gangway where visitors are allowed to join. Curiosity gets the better of you, and you step onto the wooden planks, swaying with the rhythm of the tide. Lanterns brush your shoulders as you pass, their glow warm against your skin. For a brief moment, you feel as if you've walked directly into the sky. On deck, the atmosphere is hushed, but not somber. People sit cross-legged between clusters of lanterns, whispering stories, humming half-remembered songs. A girl in a yellow scarf plucks a small stringed instrument, its sound weaving around the glow. Her lantern is beside her, painted with the image of a bird. As she strums, the lantern pulses faintly in time, like an eager listener. You smile at the thought, a duet between human and light. Futurists still argue whether music can truly program lanterns, but nobody here seems interested in academic disputes. You wander toward the prow of the barge, where the view opens onto the channel ahead. Lanterns trail behind, reflecting on the water, until the river seems stitched with threads of gold. Occasionally, a lantern detaches from the rigging and drifts upward, free at last. Each time the crowd gasps softly, then smiles, as though reminded that release is the true destiny of light. A man nearby explains that the barge's journey is symbolic. It carries the lanterns upriver, past every district of the city, before turning toward the open sea. It's the river's chance to see the stars, he says with a wink. You chuckle at the thought, picturing the water itself craning its neck in delight. Further along the deck, a group of children crouches around a cluster of lanterns, shaped like animals, rabbits, fish, even a dragon with a curling tail. They play a guessing game, identifying which creature will glow brightest when the barge passes beneath a gust of wind. Their laughter rises, mingling with the creak of ropes and the hum of the motor. The lanterns themselves seem to enjoy the game, flaring unpredictably, as if in on the mischief. You grin, imagining a lantern union negotiating clauses like mandatory playtime during festivals. As the barge drifts, the crowd on shore throws petals into the water. Lotus, hibiscus, orchids, bright colors caught briefly in lantern glow before vanishing into the current. Some petals stick to the hull, glowing faintly as lanterns above reflect on them. It looks as though the barge itself is sprouting flowers, blooming with every ripple. The procession is slow, hypnotic. You lean on the railing, eyes half closed, letting the lantern's glow blur into a wash of color. The creak of wood beneath you, the faint murmur of prayer, the occasional squeal of laughter, they all blend into a lullaby carried by the river. Futurists still argue whether humans will one day outgrow rituals tied to water, given space travel's rise. But here, afloat on light and tide, the ocean's presence feels eternal, not replaceable. Eventually, the barge glides beneath a bridge where more lanterns hang, forming an arch of light. You step off onto the gangway, leaving the vessel to continue its stately drift. From the shore, you watch it recede, glowing smaller and smaller until it looks less like a barge and more like a moving constellation. And in that moment, you realize the truth. It doesn't matter whether the lanterns are skybound or riverbound, archived or forgotten. What matters is that they move, that their glow never stays still, always searching for a new horizon. The bridge from which you disembark slopes gently into another wide platform, and this one is alive with fragrance before you even see the stalls. A wave of sweetness and spice floats through the lantern glow. Mango, tamarind, ginger, something faintly floral and slightly sour like hibiscus. You follow your nose and find yourself in the middle of the feast of forgotten fruits. Dozens of tables are arranged in a loose ring, each piled with platters that gleam in the lantern light. Bright pyramids of preserved mango slices glisten with syrup. Bowls of candied dragon fruit sparkle with crystallized sugar. Piles of jackfruit chips crunch beneath eager hands. You pause, amazed, not because the fruits look exotic, but because of the signs posted at every stall. Species once thought extinct, now revived in biolabs for the festival. You pick up a slice of mango and taste history, sticky and golden on your tongue. A volunteer explains that these fruits are the result of gene rescue projects, scientists combing seed banks and half-forgotten archives to coax lost flavors back into being. We bring them out only once a year, she says proudly, because rarity tastes sweeter. Futurists still argue whether reviving extinct foods is vanity or necessity, but as you lick syrup from your fingers, you side firmly with necessity. You wander toward a stall decorated with jellyfish-shaped lanterns. Beneath their glow, trays of translucent lychee pearls sit in ice, their fragrance heady and floral. You pop one into your mouth, and it bursts with juice so vivid it feels like someone bottled summer. A boy next to you declares loudly that the lychees taste like love. His embarrassed mother hushes him, but you laugh quietly. He's not wrong. At another stall, a chef ladles out soup from a glowing pot. Inside float cubes of breadfruit, simmered in a broth that smells both savory and tropical. You take a cup, sip, and find it soothingly strange, a mix of flavors that shouldn't belong together, but somehow do. The chef beams. We call it time soup, he explains, because each ingredient belongs to a different century. You grin, certain he's rehearsed that line all evening, but the taste lingers enough to forgive the pun. Nearby, a group of musicians plays soft notes on bamboo flutes, their sound mingling with the hum of voices and the clink of cups. Families gather at low tables, peeling jackfruit pods and handing them to sticky-fingered children. The lanterns above are shaped like fruit themselves, apples, bananas, pineapples, glowing cheerfully as if showing solidarity with their edible cousins. One lantern, shaped like a papaya, wobbles alarmingly, and a teenager quips, "It's had too much syrup." The table erupts in laughter. You overhear a debate between two scholars about whether fruit festivals like this distort cultural memory. One insists that eating revived species out of context risks turning history into spectacle. The other argues that taste is the strongest form of memory, carrying stories that words alone cannot hold. Futurists still argue, but you settle the matter for yourself by biting into another slice of mango. If this is spectacle, you'll happily eat it forever. A young couple nearby trades bites from each other's plates. She feeds him a sliver of tamarind candy, and he pretends it's too sour, grimacing dramatically. She laughs, stuffing another piece into his mouth before he can protest. Their lantern, hanging above them, glows in sync with their laughter, pulsing brighter each time. You smirk, imagining lanterns as accidental relationship counselors. Further down the platform, dessert glows faintly under jellyfish lanterns, rice cakes infused with pigment from retired orbs. They shimmer with pastel colors, lavender, pale gold, soft pink, like edible versions of the sky above. You take one and bite carefully. The cake is chewy, sweet, with a hint of something metallic, like tasting the edge of starlight. You chuckle at the thought, starlight-flavored snacks, brought to you by centuries of over-enthusiastic biochemists. At the center of the plaza, a giant communal bowl holds mixed fruit steeped in syrup. Anyone can ladle out a portion. The liquid is golden, sticky, catching lantern light, so it looks like molten sunshine. You watch as people dip their cups, laughing when their spoons sink deeper than expected. A child announces proudly that he found a fossilized grape, and his father cheers as if he's made a scientific discovery. You sit on a bench at the edge of the feast, plate balanced on your knees, lanterns drifting lazily overhead. The sweetness clings to your tongue, the salt air balances it, and for a long moment nothing exists but taste and light. The feast is less about filling your stomach and more about reminding you that flavor can carry memory across centuries, that sweetness can survive drowning. When you finally rise, brushing sugar from your fingers, the lanterns above sway approvingly, glowing brighter as if satisfied you've honored their fruity cousins. You laugh softly, stepping back onto the walkway, ready to follow the glow into whatever the night holds next. The sweetness of forgotten fruit still lingers on your tongue as you drift toward a quieter stretch of the city. The walkway here is wider, almost like a plaza, but filled less with stalls and more with work tables. Lanterns cluster above in neat grids, their glow steady rather than whimsical. You realize quickly that this district belongs not to performers or vendors, but to the ones who make it all possible, the lantern engineers. Rows of them sit behind benches stacked with tools, spools of reed, coils of wire, trays of translucent panels, and shallow tanks filled with algae cultures. You stop at the first table where an engineer is carefully inserting a sliver of biofilm into the shell of a lantern. He notices your interest and grins. "It's like making soup," he says, "except if you mess up, the bowl floats into someone's ceiling." You chuckle, imagining a homeowner shooing down rebellious lanterns with a broom. Another engineer is surrounded by holographic diagrams, each showing projected flight paths for lantern releases. She adjusts parameters with flicks of her fingers, muttering about crosswinds and buoyancy ratios. "Lanterns look effortless," she explains, "but they're basically tiny weather balloons with personalities." Futurists still argue whether engineering should prioritize precision or charm, but here it seems the goal is to balance both. You lean closer to a board pinned with sketches, lanterns shaped like whales, phoenixes, lotus blossoms. Notes in the margins debate how to prevent imbalance if one wing catches more wind than the other. A margin scrawl reads, "Solution equals let it wobble. People like wobble." You laugh out loud. The engineer overhears, shrugs, and says, "Wobble is 90% of the charm. Trust me." Further along, a group of apprentices huddle around a glowing orb. It flickers nervously, its bioluminescence stuttering. One apprentice sighs. "It keeps sulking. Every time I calibrate, it dims." Another suggests singing to it, recalling that earlier debate. They try a lullaby, and sure enough, the lantern brightens faintly, as though appeased. They cheer. You grin, picturing engineering manuals of the future. Step 7, if lantern misbehaves, apply folk song. Futurists still argue whether emergent behavior is intentional or accidental, but here, songs seem to work just fine. In one corner, a heated debate unfolds between two senior engineers. One insists that lanterns should carry AI processors to correct mid-flight errors. The other argues that too much autonomy would strip lanterns of their humanity. That part of their beauty lies in unpredictability. A lantern that never falters, she says firmly, is a lantern that never feels alive. You nod in agreement. Somewhere behind you, a lantern sneezes. Well, it flickers in a pattern that looks suspiciously like a sneeze, and you laugh, convinced it's making its own point. A young girl drags her father to one table, pointing at lantern molds shaped like animals. She begs him to buy one, but the engineer explains they're prototypes, not for sale. The girl pouts, then sneaks a finger toward a glowing rabbit lantern. It twitches its ears holographically, startling her into giggles. The engineer sighs, pretending to be exasperated, but his smile betrays pride. At another bench, a man demonstrates the eco-compliance features. He dunks a lantern fragment into a bucket of seawater. Within minutes, it dissolves into harmless nutrients, leaving only a faint sparkle. The fish will enjoy dessert, he quips. Futurists still argue whether biodegradability is enough to offset the festival's scale, but you find comfort in the thought of lanterns feeding coral gardens after their skyward journeys. You pause near a display of experimental models. One lantern is shaped like a spiral galaxy, glowing in shifting colors as it rotates. Another projects moving images on its surface, first waves, then birds, then an endless loop of someone sneezing, clearly the engineer's idea of a joke. You grin, realizing even the most serious craftspeople can't resist a prank. Before leaving, you notice a sign painted above the workshop district. Light is labor. Labor is love. It's not flashy, but it feels true. Every wobble, every glow, every ascent you've seen tonight exists because someone here stitched algae and bamboo together, argued about buoyancy, and maybe sang a lullaby when nothing else worked. You step back onto the main walkway, the engineers' laughter and bickering fading behind you. Overhead, the lanterns they've crafted drift upward, flawless in their imperfection, glowing proof that even the future's most advanced technology is still stitched together by human hands and a little stubborn joy. You leave the chatter of the engineers behind and follow the curve of the walkway until the city opens to the open sea. The horizon feels wider here, unbroken, the breeze carrying a sharper edge of salt. The lanterns above are fewer, giving you an unobstructed view of the night sky, stars scattered like careless glitter. But then you notice movement at the water's surface, flickers of light too erratic to be lanterns. Fireflies, not the old Earth kind, but engineered cousins bred to survive on salty winds and sea air. They rise in clouds from low rafts, tethered just offshore, their bioluminescence flashing in sync with the lanterns climbing the sky. The effect is surreal. Two species of light, one crafted, one living, dancing in harmony. You lean against the railing, half expecting them to spell your name by accident. The synchronization isn't coincidence. Small AI nodes float among the fireflies, releasing subtle pulses to guide their flashing. Every time a lantern flickers gold, a cluster of fireflies answers in kind, echoing the pattern across the night. Futurists still argue whether this counts as art or ecological meddling, but you can't bring yourself to worry. Watching these living sparks and engineered orbs mimic one another, you feel less like a critic and more like an accomplice in wonder. A girl beside you claps her hands. The fireflies respond instantly, scattering, then regrouping in a glowing spiral. Her parents laugh, encouraging her to clap again. She does, and the swarm bursts upward like champagne bubbles. Lanterns nearby pulse brighter, as though applauding the trick. You chuckle, imagining a future where insects bill performance invoices, 2 swarms, 3 spirals, payable in nectar. Not far from you, an elderly man explains to a small crowd, that these insects were modeled after fireflies once native to Southeast Asia, long endangered. Scientists restored their glow using ancient DNA spliced with hardy beetles. They're refugees made into citizens, he says proudly. Someone in the crowd nods, murmuring that the festival wouldn't be the same without them. Futurists still argue whether reviving lost species is hubris, but tonight, every blink feels like redemption. The swarm thickens overhead, weaving glowing trails that mirror constellations. A cluster shapes itself into a crude dragon, wings beating clumsily. Another swarm forms a shimmering spiral galaxy, complete with glowing arms. You grin at the imperfections. Fireflies don't care for symmetry, and that's what makes them charming. Lanterns drift into their midst, filling gaps, smoothing edges, creating a tapestry stitched by light and wing. A teenager near you mutters that the fireflies must get bored, repeating the same tricks. His friend disagrees, claiming the swarm is self-directing and improvises every time. You watch closely and realize the second friend is right. No two spirals look the same, no dragon repeats its wing beat exactly. The randomness is the beauty. You laugh softly, thinking how humans still crave patterns, even when chaos glows brighter. Futurists still argue whether AI should ever allow randomness, but here, it seems essential. One boy leans over the railing, holding up a glowing wristband. The fireflies flock to it instantly, covering his arm in flickering sparks. He squeals with delight, waving like a magician commanding a tiny army. His mother rolls her eyes but can't hide her smile. You picture the insects gossiping about their new general. Tonight we follow the boy with sticky fingers. The lanterns rise higher now, blending with the stars. For a dizzying second, you can't tell which glow belongs to firefly, which to lantern, which to cosmos. It's as if the boundaries have dissolved, engineered, natural, celestial, all colliding into a single glowing tide. You close your eyes, let the lights flicker behind your eyelids, and breathe in the salty air, content to be just another witness in the crowd of winged sparks. When you open them again, the swarm has drifted outward, following the lanterns toward the deeper horizon. The people around you sigh in unison, as if waking from a shared dream. You push off the railing and continue down the walkway, still blinking spots of gold across your vision, carrying the swarm's glow in your memory like a borrowed constellation. The glow of fireflies fades behind you, but the hum of excitement ahead rises like a tide. The walkway bends into a large, open platform where children cluster in noisy circles, each clutching a lantern that looks a little less ceremonial and a little more mischievous. Welcome to the lantern games of youth. You pause at the edge, curious. Here, lanterns don't just float politely into the night. They're coaxed, cajoled, and sometimes outright wrestled into performing stunts. One boy tugs a string attached to his lantern, and instead of drifting skyward, the orb hovers in place, wobbling stubbornly before zipping sideways like a startled bird. His friends cheer, then challenge him to make it spin. He flicks his wrist, and the lantern pirouettes clumsily, earning applause loud enough to rattle the railings. Nearby, a group of girls competes in a hover contest. Their lanterns rise a few feet, then hover, swing in the breeze. One flickers nervously and sinks back down, prompting groans from the crowd. Another stays perfectly still, steady as a star, and the owner lifts her chin with mock arrogance. See, I trained mine. Her friends roll their eyes, insisting it's luck. Futurists still argue whether children learn more from structured education or unstructured play, but watching these lantern duels, you'd place a firm bet on the latter. A teenage boy unveils his trick lantern. Shaped like a cube, it splits in half midair, then reassembles with a pop. The crowd gasps, then laughs when the halves briefly misalign, turning the cube lopsided. He shrugs theatrically. It's abstract art. You chuckle along, thinking that even lanterns know the value of comic timing. Another game begins. A race across the platform. Children launch their lanterns simultaneously, trying to guide them in a straight line. The wind has other plans. One lantern veers left and collides gently with a rival, prompting a round of booing. Another zooms too high, disqualified by invisible judges nobody can identify. A third crawls forward slowly but steadily, and the boy chasing after it declares victory, even though half the crowd is still debating the rules. You grin. Every game here ends with arguments and laughter in equal measure. At the far corner, a group of apprentices demonstrates singing lanterns. Each orb emits a faint hum when tapped, and the children experiment with melodies, banging them together like glowing drums. The result is chaotic, but oddly musical, like a symphony composed entirely by toddlers. One lantern hums off-key, and its handler insists proudly that it's avant-garde. You laugh aloud, imagining a future where lantern bands tour cities, each orb demanding its own dressing room. Futurists still argue whether noise counts as music, but tonight every hum sounds like joy. An older boy, clearly the unofficial champion of the games, shows off his trick lantern. At his command, it releases a puff of vapor, projecting a tiny hologram of a dancing figure. The crowd squeals in amazement. He bows, soaking in the glory. Then, of course, his lantern hiccups, spraying mist directly into his face. The crowd collapses into laughter, and even he can't resist joining in. You chuckle too, thinking this might be the truest form of equality, every champion humbled by their own lantern eventually. Parents watch from the sidelines, sipping tea, pretending not to hover anxiously. A mother mutters that her son's lantern looks like it's about to explode. His father shrugs, assuring her that's part of the design. The lantern wobbles dangerously, then rights itself, as if agreeing with him. You imagine future family dinners where lantern mishaps become legends retold for years. As the games wind down, the children gather in a circle for one final contest, the lantern chorus. Each child whispers a phrase into their orb, then releases it. The lanterns drift upward, glowing brighter in response to the wishes. One whispers, "More candy." Another, "A new raft pet." Another, "Please let school float away." The lanterns pulse and wobble, as though laughing at the requests. Futurists still argue whether lanterns are truly reactive or just programmed to glow at random. But in this moment, the children's joy makes the question irrelevant. You step back, watching the sky fill with youthful light. Lanterns bob and spin, some soaring high, others sputtering low, all leaving trails of laughter in their wake. The games may be clumsy, chaotic, even unfair, but their glow feels more genuine than any carefully orchestrated parade. As you walk away, you hear one child shout triumphantly, "My lantern is the fastest in the universe." Another retorts, "Mine can sing better." The argument fades into giggles, the lanterns rising steadily above them, carrying their boasts into the stars. The noise of the children's contests drifts away as you follow a quieter path that curves inland toward the city's heart. The walkway narrows again, lanterns hung lower, their light softer, warmer. You sense a hush in the air, as though the tide itself is bowing in respect. Soon you come upon a row of small shrines, each one marked by clusters of lanterns that glow in steady, solemn hues. Here, laughter fades into reverence. People step barefoot onto woven mats laid before the shrines. They kneel, some clasping hands, others simply resting their palms against the lantern glow. Holographic altars shimmer gently, projecting images of ancestors, faces rendered in light. The lanterns illuminate them softly so that the past feels present without overwhelming the night. You pause, instinctively lowering your voice, even your breath, as though sound itself should tread carefully here. One family kneels together before a shrine shaped like a simple arch of bamboo. A lantern glows steadily at its center, projecting a faint image of a woman's smile. The children bowed deeply, their father whispering that this was their grandmother's favorite festival. They light incense sticks that glow not with fire, but with gentle luminescence, casting thin threads of light into the air. You watch, touched by the intimacy of it. Futurists still argue whether digital memorials risk trivializing grief, but in this moment the glow feels neither shallow nor artificial. It feels necessary. You wander to another shrine, smaller, almost hidden. A single lantern glows faint amber. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "For those who could not return." The words are vague, but heavy. Lost sailors, vanished migrants, perhaps simply those who never made it back to their families. A woman kneels there alone, whispering softly. You step back, giving her space, but the weight of her silence lingers. Further along, you notice some shrines are less personal, more communal. One displays a holographic scroll of names, scrolling endlessly, each illuminated as lantern light brushes across it. Another projects a low hum of ancestral songs, voices layered so thickly you can't distinguish one from another. The sound is strangely comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket woven from thousands of breaths. You sit quietly before one shrine, its lantern painted with the image of waves. You bow your head, unsure what to offer. At last you whisper, "Thank you for carrying us." The lantern glows faintly in reply, steady and patient. You smile weakly. Perhaps it's just program feedback, or perhaps the ocean heard you and nodded. Futurists still argue whether rituals like this carry spiritual weight or are simply cultural glue. You decide it doesn't matter. The warmth in your chest is answer enough. Children pass by hushed for once, each carrying a lantern of their own. They set them gently before the shrines, watching as the lights sync with the others. One little boy places his lantern, then salutes clumsily, as though addressing an ancestor he imagines as a general. His sister giggles, but no one corrects him. Respect wears many costumes. An elder sitting nearby notices you and gestures you closer. She explains that every lantern released tonight is logged by archivists, but also echoed here in miniature shrines across the city. So no wish ever leaves alone, she says, her voice rough but kind. It travels with its ancestors. You thank her softly, feeling humbled. As you rise to leave, you catch sight of a shrine glowing brighter than the rest. Its lanterns are arranged in a circle, projecting a holographic tide pool. Inside, tiny fish of light dart among digital corals. A young girl kneels, whispering to the glowing fish, telling them about her day at school. You pause, smiling at the thought of ancestors swimming in holographic aquariums, patient enough to hear about math homework. When you finally step back onto the main walkway, the shrines fade behind you. Their glow lingers, softer than the festival's other lights, a pulse of memory beneath the glitter. You carry it forward like an invisible lantern in your chest, one you didn't buy, didn't release, but somehow still belongs to you. Leaving the shrines behind, you hear a faint humming above you, not voices this time, but machinery. The walkway slopes upward, carrying you toward a terminal where sleek gondolas wait, suspended on cables strung between towering pylons. The sign glows softly, SkyTrain to Lantern Heights. You step inside one of the cars, its windows wide and clear, and settle into a cushioned seat that feels less like transit and more like lounging in someone's living room. The train lurches gently and begins to glide forward. The city shrinks beneath you, its rafts and walkways dissolving into a patchwork of glowing threads. Lanterns float everywhere, some rising past your window as though hitching a ride. One drifts close enough that you could reach out and touch it, if the glass weren't in the way. It pulses faintly, almost as if in greeting, then veers upward. You chuckle. Nice try, no ticket. The gondola climbs higher, cables singing faintly in the night wind. From this height, you see the entire floating city, its rings and channels illuminated by lantern clusters. It looks like a galaxy sketched on the sea, each district a constellation in its own right. Futurists still argue whether orbital satellites or aerial platforms will dominate future transportation, but tonight you ride a cable strung across lantern skies, and that feels like victory enough. Other passengers murmur quietly. A couple points out the constellations formed earlier by guided lanterns. Their whispers sound reverent, as though they're touring a sacred cathedral. A child presses his nose to the glass, squealing whenever a lantern drifts close. His father jokes, "Careful, or it'll hitch a ride home with us." You laugh softly, picturing a rogue lantern stuck in someone's pantry, glowing stubbornly next to bags of rice. The gondola glides past a cluster of lanterns tethered deliberately to the cables. They pulse in rhythm, marking the route like glowing milestones. Some are painted with symbols, birds, waves, stars. You imagine tired commuters using them as waypoints, silently counting their way home after long nights. A woman across from you sighs happily, pointing to one painted with a turtle. "That's the one my grandfather designed," she explains to her companion. "We ride this line every year just to see it again." The lantern blinks gently, as though acknowledging her devotion. As the gondola ascends toward its highest point, the view widens to include the open sea. Lanterns drift far out, reflecting in the waves like scattered gems. Ships pass in the distance, their navigation lights faint compared to the playful brilliance of the festival. For a dizzying moment, you can't tell where sea ends and sky begins. It's all one glowing fabric stitched together by lantern thread. A voice on the intercom, soft, soothing, like a bedtime story, explains that these sky trains were once controversial. Engineers worried about winds, about weight, about whether lanterns would interfere with sensors. Futurists still argue whether such extravagance is sustainable, but as the gondola sways gently, you're grateful for the audacity. Without it, you'd never see the city from this height, never watch lanterns drift both above and below you, like twin galaxies. The train begins its descent, cables curving toward the opposite station. Passengers lean forward, reluctant to let the view shrink. A boy waves vigorously at lanterns, as if they were parade floats. His sister insists one winked back at her. You smile, tempted to believe her. Why shouldn't lanterns wink? They've already learned to hum, hover, and sulk. As the gondola eases into the terminal, you linger in your seat, savoring the last sweep of view. The doors open with a soft chime, and passengers spill onto the platform, murmuring about what they saw. You step out last, turning for one final glance at the glowing horizon. The cables stretch across the city like threads of silver, lanterns clinging to them like beads on a necklace. The walkway awaits again, lanterns clustering thick above it. But for a moment you pause, carrying the memory of the SkyTrain, the sensation of being lifted into a tapestry of light, part traveler, part lantern yourself. You step off the SkyTrain platform and follow a stream of soft music that seems to shimmer through the night air. The walkway leads to a wide circular platform, less bustling than the feast or the markets, but alive in its own slower rhythm. Here couples gather, moving gently in time with the music beneath, cascades of hanging lanterns. Their glow falls like slow-motion rain, every orb suspended on delicate wires, swaying just enough to create the illusion of falling light. You pause at the edge, watching the scene unfold. The music comes from a trio of performers stationed under a canopy, one plucking at a stringed instrument shaped like a crescent moon, another tapping rhythms on a hollow drum, and a third coaxing breathy tones from a reed flute. The sound is hypnotic, soft but steady, like the tide if it had learned to hum. Futurists still argue whether live performance will survive when AI can generate endless symphonies, but tonight the imperfections of human timing feel like the true luxury. Couples sway together, their movements less like formal dance and more like shared drifting. A woman in a robe patterned with koi fish steps lightly with her partner, their feet barely leaving the floor. Nearby, a younger pair clumsily bumps into each other, laughing, correcting, then stumbling again. Their lantern, tied to the boy's belt, bobs between them like a chaperone, glowing brighter each time they collide. You smile. It's hard to say whether the lantern is encouraging or mocking them. You wander further onto the platform. Overhead, streams of lanterns are lowered slowly, drifting down until they hover just above the dancers' heads. The effect is magical. Couples move beneath veils of glowing orbs, brushing them with hair, shoulders, fingertips. Some lanterns even respond with faint pulses of light, as though blessing each dance step. A man whispers to his partner, "Careful, step too hard, and the lantern will give us a review." She laughs, twirling into his arms. In the center of the platform stands a spiral column, its frame wound with lanterns that glow in gradient hues. The lights shift gently from deep indigo at the base to pale gold at the top, creating a moving rainbow as if time itself were climbing upward. Some couples pause before it, pressing their foreheads together in silence. The column seems to listen. Futurists still argue whether architecture can be spiritual, but this glowing tower feels less like construction and more like ritual. You notice an older couple moving at the very edge of the floor. Their steps are tiny, careful, but their faces beam with the kind of ease only decades together can sculpt. Their lantern hovers between them on a short tether, swinging gently with each step, perfectly in sync. A group of teenagers nearby nudges each other, whispering that the elders are winning the dance. You grin. Perhaps in this game, longevity is the only score that matters. A joke slips into your head. Imagine lanterns assigned as dance judges, docking points for clumsy footwork. -2 stepped on your partner's shoe, -5 sneezed in rhythm. You smother a laugh, not wanting to disrupt the serene pace. Still the image lingers, and the lanterns swaying above seem almost complicit. You move toward the far side of the platform, where a refreshment table offers cups of cool nectar brewed from hibiscus and honey. You take one, sip, and find it tart enough to wake your tongue, yet smooth enough to soothe your throat. The combination feels deliberate, a drink that keeps you awake just enough to enjoy the dream. As you sip, you glance upward again. Lanterns form shifting constellations directly above the dancers, hearts, spirals, even crude silhouettes of couples twirling. The effect isn't polished, but it doesn't need to be. Each shape dissolves into another, mirroring the ebb and flow of movement below. You realize you've been swaying slightly yourself, glass in hand, pulled unconsciously into the rhythm. When the song ends, the dancers pause, bowing slightly to their partners before dispersing. New couples step in, and the music begins again, different but equally soft, equally slow. You take a deep breath, setting down your empty cup, and step back onto the walkway. Behind you, the platform continues to glow, lanterns drifting like slow rain, dancers moving like waves beneath them. For a moment, you feel a pang of longing, not for a partner necessarily, but for the rhythm itself, the quiet intimacy of drifting in sync with another heartbeat under falling light. You carry the sensation with you as you move forward, lantern glow painting the path ahead. The sound reaches you first, low, resonant, as if the sea has learned to sing in a human key. You follow the walkway toward a crescent-shaped amphitheater carved into the city's outer ring. The steps descend in wide, gentle arcs almost to the waterline, and at their base, a fringe of lanterns floats like a necklace laid on the ocean's throat. Every few seconds, the waves lift the lights and set them down again, a breathing you can see. A sign at the entry reads, "Ocean Choir, Ongoing." Beside it, a schematic shows hidden hydrophones sunk beneath the platforms, listening to currents and translating their pressure changes into sound. Arrays of transducers tucked under the steps hum back into the water, coaxing the tide into harmony. It's a feedback loop between sea and city, call and response with no conductor. Mainstream projections once promised that coastal settlements would integrate blue acoustics to reduce stress and synchronize public spaces with circadian rhythms. Futurists still argue whether it's science or spa marketing, but as the first chord rises, deep, patient, almost whale-like, you feel your pulse agree. People sit scattered along the steps, faces tilted toward the night. Some hold hands. Some lean their heads back and close their eyes. You choose a seat halfway down, close enough to taste salt on the air and far enough to let the amphitheater's curve cradle the sound. The lanterns in the water blush faintly, then brighten in slow waves that mirror the music, gold to jade to pale violet, like the sea is changing moods one color at a time. The next swell rolls in, and a choir of hidden speakers breathes with it, layering translucent harmonies over the natural hiss. You can't spot the tech. It's embedded in the architecture, the way a heartbeat hides beneath a shirt. A little boy 2 rows down whispers, "The ocean's practicing." His mother nods solemnly. She's always practicing. You smile, truth and joke, perfectly balanced. To your left, a cluster of students holds tablets showing spectral graphs of the sound, peaks rising and falling like mountain ranges. They whisper about phase coherence and acoustic coupling, the language of passion disguised as homework. One of them claims the system can learn a person's preferred harmony from their breathing and subtly adjust the mix for comfort. Another says that's pure rumor. Futurists still argue whether adaptive public soundscapes are empathetic design or a slippery slope to mood engineering. The ocean, undeterred, goes on singing in its oldest tongue. Wind slides over the amphitheater, and the choir shifts timbre. The low notes thin, higher tones bloom like phosphorescence. Lanterns bob, and occasional firefly stragglers drift through like punctuation marks. You feel the seat's wood warm beneath you from a hidden radiant strip. Someone decided that legs should never be cold during a concert. It's the sort of unglamorous genius that makes a city kinder than it needs to be. A facilitator in a dark jacket steps to the edge and raises a palm, not to hush, the place is already hushed, but to invite. "Breathe on the 4, she says softly, amplified just enough to graze the far steps. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold and out, 2, 3, 4. The audience obeys almost instinctively. On the second cycle, the harmony shifts to match the collective exhale, as if the ocean took the crowd's breath and tuned itself like an instrument. You catch yourself grinning. Somewhere, a composer fell in love with a tide chart and never recovered. A thin string of lanterns detaches from the fringe and floats outward, forming a gentle arc. The orbs brighten in a staggered pattern that visually traces the dominant chord. A child points, delighted. The facilitator explains, barely above a whisper, that the lanterns are responding to underwater pressure gradients mapped to color. "You're seeing the music," she says. "You're hearing the waves' handwriting." A teenage boy beside you mimes conducting, tiny wrist flicks, shaping imaginary crescendos. His friend elbows him. "If you make it modulate to D major, I'm leaving." The music, perhaps eavesdropping, slides teasingly toward D for half a measure, then drifts back with a playful swell. Both boys gasp, then laugh, instantly converted to believers. You snort under your breath, put ocean sass on the list of emergent properties no one foresaw. The piece, if that's what you can call something that never really begins or ends, leans into a series of gentle pulses like distant boat wakes that took up meditation. The lanterns mirror them as soft rings of light expanding across the water. An elderly couple 2 steps below you squeeze closer together at each pulse, timing affection to the sea's metronome. You think of all the human rituals that learned their rhythm from water first, rowing songs, harbor bells, lullabies. Maybe every concert is derivative of a tide. Behind you, two engineers whisper about a proposal to pipe the ocean choir's live feed to orbiting habitats so station crews can hear Earth breathe during long nights. One worries about latency, that ruinous half-second that turns duets into arguments. The other shrugs. Will time stretch the sea? She won't mind futurists still argue whether exporting Earth's signatures to space preserves culture or makes homesickness worse. You picture a Martian botanist pausing over basil seedlings as a slowed Pacific sigh washes the dome, and your chest tightens in that bittersweet way good ideas often do. A gull skates across the air, its shadow passing like a soft hand over the steps. The choir folds the moment in, thinning to let the bird's cry print on the sound. The lanterns dim respectfully, then brighten again, like breath returning. You let your eyes fall shut. In the dark behind your lids, the sea unspools as long vowel sounds, lanterns as consonants that click and glow, a language you don't speak but understand. The facilitator raises her hand again, and the harmony stretches into something almost choral, faint human voices joining the water. It takes you a beat to realize the voices aren't people at all. They're modelings of archived singers from festivals past, woven so delicately you couldn't separate them if you tried. It isn't eerie. It's tender, as though memory itself has been tuned to kindness. A little joke flits through. If your past self could bill for royalties every time a nostalgia algorithm sampled your hum in the shower, you'd retire on a yacht made of playlists. You suppress a chuckle. The ocean is mid-sentence. On the lower step, a small robot shaped like a pebble inches along, pausing wherever puddles linger. It sips the water with a tiny pump and sprays a mist that smells faintly of citrus and rain. The amphitheater sighs, collectively amused. Even the janitorial bots are in on the ASMR. One child pat-pats the bot like a pet. It glows bashfully and trundles on. The choir deepens, then lightens, then leans toward silence the way a wave leans toward shore. Lanterns settle to a patient glow. The facilitator bows her head, and the audience follows suit, as if acknowledging a partner at the end of a dance. There's no applause, only a ripple of breath, a few sniffles, a soft laugh here and there at the absurd perfection of it. You stand slowly. The wood yields your shape back, the air cools your cheeks, and the sea resumes its 1,000 private jobs, lifting, carrying, remembering. On the path out, a plaque catches your eye. This choir is tuned nightly to the moon's position. If it sounds different tomorrow, thank the sky. You nod, pocketing the fact as if it were a seashell. Mainstream urban planners once framed floating cities as feats of resilience. Here, resilience sounds like a lullaby. At the top of the steps, you look back one more time. The lantern fringe gleams. A new swell rises, a fresh chord gathers, and somewhere in the depths a hydrophone leans in to listen. You smile, warmed by the idea that this place will keep singing long after you've drifted elsewhere, your breath one exhale among thousands that briefly tuned the tide. You leave the amphitheater with its sighing harmonies still echoing in your ears. The walkway turns narrow again, the crowd thinning as if funneling you into a quieter secret. Soon you find yourself in a shadowed courtyard tucked between towering bamboo struts. Here the lanterns are fewer, and they don't hang high in the air. They hover low, gathered close, as though guarding something precious. At the center of the courtyard sits a circle of guild elders, robed in fabrics embroidered with tiny points of light. Their lanterns rest on the ground around them, glowing faintly like embers banked for the night. People gather at the edges to watch and listen, but no one dares interrupt. You sense immediately that this is not performance, not spectacle, but the inner circle of the Lantern Guild. One elder leans forward, voice rasping yet clear. "We used to weave lantern frames from river reeds," she says. "The weight mattered more than the light. Too heavy, and the lantern drowned before it ever learned the sky." Another elder shakes his head, insisting that the real challenge was not weight, but breath, the human breath used to inflate old lanterns. "It carried your spirit with it," he mutters, "and that's why the lantern knew how to climb." Futurists still argue whether such folklore counts as physics or poetry, but the Guild seems uninterested in dividing the two. They speak of secrets passed down, how to fold paper so light it whispered when touched, how to mix dyes that glowed brighter under moonlight, how to knot cords that would never tangle, even when soaked in salt spray. One elder recalls the triple spiral weave, a technique banned centuries ago for reasons no one remembers. Another laughs, claiming the ban was a trick to keep apprentices from learning too quickly. You chuckle quietly, half believing both. At one point, a younger apprentice dares to ask about the night lantern, a rumored design said to shine only when no eyes are watching. The courtyard stills. One elder nods slowly. "It existed. I built it once." His lantern at his feet flickers, as if in confirmation. "But some lights are meant for solitude, not festivals." He says no more. The crowd exhales in a single ripple, as though agreeing to let mystery remain mysterious. The Guild also speaks of their quiet rebellions. One elder confesses to sneaking jokes into her lantern designs, hidden folds that made them wobble or tilt just enough to amuse children. Another admits he once painted a lantern with an unflattering caricature of a city official. "It floated high," he chuckles, "but not high enough to escape her glare." The audience laughs softly, the kind of laugh that carries respect. Even Guild elders, it seems, cherish mischief. As you listen, you realize that while archivists keep records of lanterns, the Guild keeps their souls. They debate not just materials and methods, but meanings, why wobble matters, why imperfection charms, why no two lanterns should ever look the same. Futurists still argue whether standardization is progress, but the Guild insists a lantern is not a product, it's a personality. You watch as one elder lifts a lantern from the ground. It looks plain, just a pale sphere with no decoration. But when she breathes gently into it, the glow shifts into swirling patterns, like storm clouds rolling across its surface. Gasps ripple through the courtyard. She sets it down again, and the patterns vanish. "It remembers breath," she whispers. The younger apprentices nod fervently, scribbling notes, though you suspect no manual will capture what just happened. Nearby, another elder unties a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside lies a lantern frame unlike any you've seen, twisted, asymmetrical, almost ugly. He explains that this was built during the first year the city floated, when resources were scarce and fear was constant. It barely rose, he admits, but it carried our stubbornness. He chuckles and the lantern flickers weakly, as if embarrassed by its own survival. The courtyard hums with affection for the imperfect relic. The conversation drifts into silence, elders nodding at one another, their lanterns glowing faintly like resting animals. One finally murmurs, "Every lantern is a secret, but most secrets are gentle." You breathe that line in deeply, letting it settle. When you finally step away, the courtyard seems to grow dimmer without your gaze. The Guild remains seated, their circle unbroken, their whispers continuing behind you. You walk quietly, lantern light brushing your shoulders, carrying with you the sense that some knowledge is not written in books, not archived in holograms, but spoken softly in courtyards, passed hand to hand like fragile flame. The walkway narrows once more, carrying you away from the hushed Guild courtyard into a livelier pocket of the city. The scents hit first, savory steam and faint sugar, followed by the sight of glowing trays arranged on floating counters. Here the night bends toward comfort, toward indulgence, midnight meals beneath lantern glow. You step onto a raft lined with low tables, each illuminated not by overhead lanterns, but by dishes that glow faintly themselves. A server in a crimson sash greets you with a grin and sets down a small rice cake that shimmers pale gold. Made with lantern pigments, she explains. Perfect bedtime snack. You bite in cautiously. The texture is soft, chewy, the sweetness gentle, almost sleepy. The faint shimmer leaves a playful tingle on your tongue. You chuckle. It feels like eating moonlight disguised as dessert. All around, people sit in clusters, trading bites and murmuring with the drowsy cadence of those who know the night is already carrying them toward rest. Children half asleep lean on their parents' shoulders, still clutching sticky treats. Lanterns bob overhead in slow arcs, dimmed to twilight hues, lavender, soft amber, smoky blue, colors chosen less to dazzle and more to soothe. Futurists still argue whether food engineered to glow is harmless or hubristic, but as you lick sugar from your lips, you can't imagine the festival without it. You drift toward another stall where an old man ladles steaming porridge into bowls. The grains sparkle faintly, flecked with minerals harvested from sea farms. Eat slowly, he advises. It tastes best if you let the glow fade in your mouth. You obey, and he's right. The porridge starts bright and ends mellow, like a lullaby that resolves on the last note. A woman beside you sighs contentedly and mutters, "Tastes like childhood, only shinier." You laugh softly in agreement. At the next counter, skewers of grilled sea mushrooms sizzle over low heat. Their caps glimmer faintly, each bite releasing a puff of phosphorescent smoke. A teenager waves a skewer dramatically, leaving glowing trails in the air like edible sparklers. His friends howl with laughter until the vendor scolds him gently. Eat your art. Don't waste it. You grin, picturing lantern festivals of the past where sparks were forbidden, only to return centuries later disguised as snacks. You take a seat at a communal table where strangers share platters of dumplings tinted pastel with lantern dye. One dumpling bursts open with broth that glows faint teal. Someone jokes that it's like eating glow sticks, and the table erupts in sleepy laughter. Another diner raises her cup of fermented sea fruit, declaring, "To tomorrow's digestion." The toast is met with clinking bowls and more laughter. You join in, amused by the mixture of reverence and absurdity. Across the table, an apprentice engineer explains to his companions that every midnight meal has to pass a calmness index. Foods too spicy, too caffeinated, too stimulating are banned during the festival. Imagine thousands of people wired on chili at 2 a.m., he groans. Total chaos. Futurists still argue whether regulating food for mood is wise or patronizing, but the drowsy smiles around you suggest the index works just fine. A group of children nearby negotiates dessert trades. One offers 2 glowing rice cakes for a single candied lotus seed, sparking a heated barter that ends with giggles and sticky fingers. Their lanterns bob overhead, dimming slowly, as though encouraging them toward sleep. You imagine the lanterns conspiring. If we tire them out with sugar crashes, bedtime arrives sooner. From the far side of the raft, a cook unveils the highlight of the night, a giant pudding shaped like a lantern itself, glowing warmly from within. The crowd gathers as slices are served, each wobbling piece quivering like a jelly star. You accept a portion and laugh softly when it trembles on your spoon, as though reluctant to be eaten. The flavor is mild, creamy, comforting, a taste designed not to excite, but to calm. As you finish your pudding, the lanterns overhead dim further, casting the raft in a dusky haze. Voices lower, conversation slowing to murmurs. Some diners stretch out on cushions, letting the food lull them toward half-sleep before continuing their walk. A server collects empty bowls with the patience of someone who knows rest is the real dessert. You rise, stomach warm and eyelids heavier, and step back onto the walkway. Behind you, the raft glows faintly, a floating dining room adrift in the dark. Ahead, more lanterns wait, brighter and higher, guiding you deeper into the festival. But for now, you carry with you the gentle satisfaction of midnight flavors, the taste of a city that knows how to feed even its dreams. You follow the main causeway upward, noticing how the lanterns ahead grow larger, steadier, as though preparing you for something monumental. The walkway narrows, then spirals around the base of a tall structure. At first, you think it's just another tower for observation, but then you realize its purpose. This is one of the great lantern towers. It rises like a helix into the night, its frame built from polished bamboo composites, gleaming in the glow. Lanterns are affixed at every level, some resting in niches, others hanging in slow spirals upward. A sign near the entrance explains, each tower lifts its lanterns on solar winds, channeling warmth from stored panels and directing it skyward. You smile, intrigued by the phrase, solar winds turned into ladders of light. Futurists still argue whether such feats are engineering triumphs or ritual indulgence, but the tower looms above, majestic proof that sometimes the answer is simply both. You step inside. A spiral stair climbs along the inner wall, wide enough to accommodate the crowd of festival goers moving upward. Families climb slowly, carrying lanterns carefully in their hands. Children tug eagerly at their parents, wanting to reach the top faster. The air is thick with warmth, rising from vents that feed the ascent. Every few steps you pass a platform where people pause to place their lanterns onto rails. As soon as they do, a soft current catches the lantern, lifting it gently upward through the spiral shaft until it emerges at the tower's crown. Watching, you feel a tug of awe. Lanterns don't just rise from human hands here, they ride currents engineered to mimic wind itself, ascending with a grace that looks like magic, but smells faintly of circuitry. You pass one family as they release their lantern, painted with waves and shells. The child squeals when it starts to float, chasing it up the stairs until it vanishes into the higher glow. The father mutters, "Every year I forget it feels this good." You nod silently, agreeing. Halfway up, you pause to lean against the railing. Looking down, you see the lower levels glitter with hundreds of lanterns in waiting, like stars stored in baskets. Looking up, you see the spiraling ascent, lanterns sliding skyward in glowing currents. The tower feels alive, breathing light like lungs. A volunteer explains to a curious visitor that the solar panels along the tower's base gather energy all day, then release it at night through microheaters. The warm currents are carefully calibrated. Too strong and lanterns wobble uncontrollably, too weak and they sink. "It's less science, more cooking," he says with a grin. "We simmer them up." You laugh, picturing engineers in aprons, seasoning lanterns like soup. Near the top, the crowd grows quieter. Here, the lanterns are more elaborate. Phoenixes with wings of flame-colored silk, jellyfish trailing luminous tendrils, lotus blossoms that open as they rise. Each design seems to celebrate both the past and the wild creativity of the present. One group of teenagers releases a lantern shaped like a robot holding a broom. As it floats, the robot waves stiffly, drawing laughter from everyone nearby. "Housework never dies," one teen jokes. You grin, thinking the lantern might be the truest prophecy of the night. Finally, you reach the summit platform. The air is thinner, cooler, carrying a steady hum of currents. From here you see the lanterns exiting the crown of the tower, one after another, flowing into the sky like pearls on an invisible thread. The view stretches endlessly, the sea below scattered with drifting lights, the heavens above filling with new ones. For a dizzy moment, you can't tell which stars are natural, which are lanterns, which are just fireflies wandering. The distinctions blur, and you let them. A hush falls across the summit. A family steps forward, releasing their lantern together. It rises slowly, a soft sphere painted with images of their home. The child waves furiously until it disappears into the constellation forming above. You feel a sudden pang of tenderness, like you've borrowed their hope for a moment. Futurists still argue whether such rituals can sustain communities in the long run, but right here, right now, the glow is enough. You linger, letting the cold brush your skin before finally stepping back onto the spiral stairs for the descent. The tower continues its endless work behind you, lifting lanterns on invisible currents, adding one more glow, then another, until the night itself seems stitched together by rising light. Descending from the tower, you rejoin the main walkway, which feels quieter now, more personal. The lanterns here don't gather in massive clusters or ascend in formal parades. Instead, they hang in small, deliberate groups, glowing steadily. You notice pairs of people pausing beneath them, whispering softly, arranging orbs with an almost conspiratorial care. Curiosity pulls you closer. A young woman takes 2 lanterns from her bag and hands one to the man beside her. They each whisper into their lights, then step back, comparing the glow. His lantern shifts to pale green, hers to soft violet. They laugh, rearrange the orbs, and suddenly the colors merge into a shared gradient. You realize you're witnessing a subtle language of light, a code of affection. Around you, dozens of others are doing the same. Lovers, siblings, friends, all manipulating lanterns into sequences, creating glowing sentences only they can read. Some arrange 3 in a row, others a ring of 5. One daring couple even tries to balance 7 lanterns on a rail. Each configuration is a message, and each lantern responds differently, pulsing, dimming, shifting hue. Futurists still argue whether this counts as communication or mere spectacle, but the laughter and blushes suggest the words are clear enough. You stop beside a group of students hunched over a cluster of lanterns. One explains that the system began centuries ago as a way to send secret notes across rafts without paper. Now it's just flirting, she adds with a grin. Her friend protests, cheeks reddening as his lantern pulses bright pink. The group bursts into laughter, and you chuckle with them, appreciating the timelessness of embarrassment. One couple catches your attention. They stand silently, arranging 5 lanterns into a pentagon. The orbs glow in sequence: blue, gold, white. She presses her fingers together nervously. He smiles, nodding. They both lean closer, and the lanterns brighten, sealing the message. You don't know what they said, but you don't need to. The glow carries it better than words. A joke drifts through your mind. Imagine lanterns as nosy matchmakers gossiping among themselves. Did you see those 2? Definitely a confession. Pass it up the chain. You smile at the thought, picturing a constellation of lanterns trading romantic rumors across the city. Futurists still argue whether intimacy will survive in a future dominated by mediated communication, but here it thrives, glowing in soft, coded pulses. Further along, a child arranges lanterns clumsily, trying to mimic the patterns she's seen. Her sequence doesn't glow properly, it flickers in chaotic bursts. Frustrated, she stomps her foot. An older woman kneels beside her, gently reordering the lanterns until they settle into a smooth rhythm of pink and silver. The child's face lights with pride. She hugs the woman, declaring loudly, "Now it says thank you." Everyone nearby smiles, even if the exact message is lost. At the edge of the walkway, a narrow pier juts into the water. There, people set their coated lanterns adrift, watching them drift together into clusters. Some lanterns respond, shifting colors to match the nearest neighbor, creating ripples of shared messages across the tide. It looks like the ocean itself is receiving love letters, translating them into glowing Morse across the waves. You pause, caught in the beauty of it, imagining the sea as an eternal pen pal. You step back eventually, letting others claim the space. Behind you, whispers continue, lanterns blink in secret patterns, and laughter punctuates the hush. Ahead, brighter lights wait, promising a different kind of glow. But for a moment, you carry the warmth of coded messages in your chest, a reminder that sometimes the most enduring technologies are simply new ways of saying what's always been said. I remember you. I need you. I love you. The coded whispers fade behind you as the walkway veers toward the water's edge once more. Here, rafts are tethered gently, each outfitted not with stalls or shrines, but with low bedding, soft mats, and pillows stitched from kelp fibers. Lanterns hover just above, dim to the hue of candlelight. A sign sways in the breeze. Lantern sleep boats drift into dreams. Curiosity wins again, and you step aboard one. The raft rocks ever so slightly, a cradle on the tide. Families, couples, and solitary wanderers are already sprawled out, some murmuring softly, others silent, eyes closed. The lanterns above flicker in slow rhythm, syncing with the waves as if inhaling and exhaling. One child stares upward, fighting sleep until his lantern dims in sympathy. He pouts, mutters, "Traitor!" then giggles before finally closing his eyes. A guide in a dark sash moves quietly between mats, offering small cups of herbal broth. You accept one, sip, and taste chamomile laced with something faintly briny, like seawater, softened into tea. The warmth spreads through your chest, pulling your breath lower. Not medicine, the guide whispers, just suggestion. You nod, amused. Suggestion seems plenty effective. Futurists still argue whether engineered environments should actively encourage sleep. But lying here, you're not inclined to resist. The lanterns above shift again, dimming further. One by one they soften into blues and silvers, projecting faint ripples across the canopy, as if you're already underwater. The effect is soothing. You feel submerged without ever getting wet. Someone nearby murmurs, "It feels like being inside a whale's lullaby." You smile in the dark, half tempted to agree. As the raft drifts slightly with the current, a low hum begins, barely audible, but enough to vibrate in your bones. It's not music exactly, more like the background thrum of an engine softened into comfort. A toddler on the far side imitates the sound, humming in sync until her father chuckles and joins in. Soon half the raft is resonating like an impromptu choir of sleepy whales. You stifle a laugh, not wanting to break the spell. Your eyes wander to the edge of the raft, where small drones shaped like fish glide lazily in the water. Their backs emit a faint glow, casting moving patterns onto the raft's underside. The shifting light mimics the effect of moonlit waves, except steadier, more deliberate. It's stagecraft for sleep. Futurists still argue whether artificial rhythms can truly replicate nature, but as your eyelids dip heavier, the debate feels far away. Someone on a neighboring raft sneezes, and their lantern pulses sympathetically, almost like it's offering tissues. The raft giggles softly, and the sneezer waves sheepishly. You grin, thinking of lanterns as tiny caretakers, too polite to ignore human frailty. You stretch out fully on a mat, staring upward. Lanterns dim in gradual waves, like stars blinking out one at a time. For a moment you imagine them coordinating a bedtime countdown. 5, 4, 3. But of course they never reach zero. They simply hover at the threshold between glow and darkness, coaxing the mind toward dreams without forcing it. Some passengers eventually doze off, their breathing audible in the stillness. Others linger in that hazy liminal space, half awake, half adrift. You hover there too, the raft swaying gently beneath you, the herbal warmth loosening your chest, the lanterns whispering patience overhead. Eventually you rise, reluctantly, quietly. The raft is a cocoon, But the night still holds more. You step carefully onto the walkway, leaving others to their dreams. Behind you, the sleep boats float steady, lanterns dimmed low, carrying sleepers across an ocean that needs no destination. The hush of the sleep boats lingers as you continue along the walkway, but soon the quiet gives way to a growing murmur, a current of voices building in volume and anticipation. You sense before you see it, the climax of the night. The path widens into a massive plaza that stretches almost to the edge of the city, its platforms layered like terraces, all facing outward toward the sea. Thousands of people have gathered, each holding their lantern, waiting. Overhead, the sky is already flecked with scattered points of light. But you can feel it. Something bigger is about to happen. You find a place along the railing as the crowd shifts restlessly. Families huddle together, children clutching lantern strings tightly in both fists. Couples lean against each other, their orbs glowing faintly in their laps. Even the loners seem folded into the collective hush, like drops in the same tide. The air thickens with salt, anticipation, and that peculiar warmth of human bodies gathered in unison. A soft chime sounds. One, then another, then dozens, rippling across the plaza until the air vibrates with a subtle chorus. The crowd lifts their lanterns simultaneously, thousands of orbs raised like offerings. You feel your own hands rise almost automatically, though no lantern rests there. Still, the motion pulls you into the rhythm, and then it begins, the great release. On cue, every tether is unclipped, every hand lets go. Thousands of lanterns surge upward together, carried by engineered currents that sweep across the plaza like invisible hands. For a moment, the collective glow blinds you. It's as if someone has poured a second sunrise into the night sky. Gasps ripple through the crowd. A child squeals. Someone claps instinctively, but the sound is swallowed by the sheer immensity of light. The lanterns rise in waves, not all at once but in carefully staggered pulses. First a cluster of reds, then blues, then golds, then pale silvers. The effect is mesmerizing, color washing upward in tides, blending into new hues before dissolving into the wider dark. Futurists still argue whether this choreography honors tradition or distorts it, but as the air fills with glowing currents, the debate feels irrelevant. What matters is the breathtaking enormity, the sense that the sky itself has decided to bloom. You watch as shapes form, spirals, constellations, drifting rivers of light. The lanterns seem alive, moving with uncanny coordination, though you know engineers in hidden booths are guiding some of the flow. A spiral expands until it covers half the visible sky, each lantern a star pinned into place. In its center, a single orb glows brighter than the rest, pulsing like a heartbeat. People cheer softly, then fall quiet again, unwilling to break the spell. A small boy beside you tugs his father's sleeve, whispering, "Which one is ours?" His father laughs, pointing vaguely upward. "All of them." The boy frowns, unsatisfied, but then a lantern nearby flares unexpectedly, as though answering him. He beams, convinced, and waves furiously until his arm tires. The crowd is not silent, but the noise has changed, less chatter, more reverent murmur. People speak in half-whispers, as though in the presence of something holy. You feel your throat tighten. The lanterns blur slightly as your eyes sting, though whether from emotion or wind, you can't tell. Above, the tide of light thickens until stars themselves seem outnumbered. The Milky Way looks pale compared to the human-made galaxy unfurling below it. You imagine the view from orbit, astronauts glancing down, seeing this temporary cosmos and mistaking it for a new constellation. Futurists still argue whether such spectacles will one day replace natural wonders, but here, in this breathless moment, the sky feels doubled, not diminished. As the lanterns continue upward, you sense the plaza breathing with them, thousands of lungs synchronized, thousands of hearts pulsing to the same rhythm. You have no lantern of your own, but it doesn't matter. The release is communal. The glow belongs to everyone. You lean forward against the railing, eyes wide, until the first wave of lanterns drifts high enough to merge with the stars. They flicker smaller, softer, but the sense of enormity remains. The great release is not a single moment, but an unfolding, wave after wave, until the horizon itself seems woven from light. And you realize, with a slow smile, that this is the closest thing the future has to fireworks. No explosions, no noise, only patience, only glow. Lanterns climbing together into forever, carrying wishes too soft to shout, but too bright to keep hidden. The crowd lingers, gazes tilted skyward, long after the great release has begun its slow climb. You stay too because how could you not? The lanterns thin as they ascend, some vanishing into the haze of distance, others winking out like sighs too faint to reach the stars. The plaza begins to empty, but you remain at the railing, watching the afterglow stretch itself thin across the horizon. The sea reflects the sky in trembling shards. For a moment, you can't tell whether the lanterns above are mirrored below, or whether the ocean has claimed some of its own. A gull skims across the surface, scattering the reflections into fragments. The glow reforms instantly, patient as always. Beside you, two strangers speak softly. One says the fading reminds them of fireworks back on land, bright, loud, over in minutes. The other shakes her head. Fireworks explode, lanterns endure. Even when they're gone, they don't feel gone. You find yourself nodding, silently agreeing. Futurists still argue whether endurance or intensity defines memory, but here, endurance feels like mercy. You notice a lantern straggler drifting lower than the rest. It flickers faintly, its buoyancy failing. A child points and gasps, worried it will fall, but then a sudden updraft catches it, lifting it back into the stream. The crowd cheers softly, relieved. You smile, imagining the lantern smirking as it rejoins the climb, late but proud. The sky continues to dim. The brightest clusters now appear only as faint constellations, indistinguishable from stars unless you'd seen them born. You lean on the railing, chin resting on your palm, and think of how many wishes have just joined the cosmos, millions of small requests, more love, more laughter, maybe even more dumplings. Somewhere above, the galaxy is now cluttered with human hopes, like sticky notes plastered across infinity. A small group of teenagers nearby argues about which lanterns reached higher. One insists hers is now orbiting. Another says his stopped halfway to gossip with fireflies. Their friend jokes, "Mine went to complain about the Wi-Fi signal." They all laugh, voices carrying across the platform like playful punctuation. You chuckle with them, amused at how easily awe turns back into comedy. An elder shuffles past you, leaning on a cane that glows faintly at its tip. He pauses, gazes upward, and mutters, "We release them, but they never really leave." You glance at him, wanting to ask more, but he smiles faintly and keeps walking. His lantern wisdom lingers, though, like a riddle you're content not to solve. The plaza empties further until only a few remain, dreamers, stragglers, you. The lanterns are specks now, faint and far, merging with natural stars. You close your eyes briefly, and when you open them, the sky looks ordinary again, save for the faintest glow smudged across the black. The extraordinary has folded back into the everyday, quiet and unassuming. You exhale, a little sad, but not crushed. The beauty of lanterns lies not just in their ascent, but in their fading. They teach you how to let go gently. Futurists still argue whether festivals exist to celebrate beginnings or endings, but you think maybe they exist to blur the line, to make both feel like the same glow drifting upward. The sea laps against the stilts of the platform, steady and unhurried. You take one last look at the faint scatter of lanterns overhead. They're almost gone now, swallowed by distance, but the afterimage remains etched across your vision, like sparks dancing behind closed eyelids. When you finally turn away, the night feels quieter, softer. Behind you, the great release continues invisibly, lanterns drifting where no eye can follow. Ahead, the walkway beckons with dimmer lights, pulling you gently toward the festival's end. The walkway grows narrower, quieter, as though the city itself understands you've reached the closing stretch of the night. The crowd has thinned into scattered silhouettes, most drifting home or curling into sleep boats. You wander on, slower now, guided not by spectacle, but by the faint glow that still lingers everywhere, an afterlight that seems to soak into wood, water, even your skin. You find a final platform jutting out toward the open ocean. It's small, nearly deserted, its railings lined with lanterns left behind by festival goers, too tired to carry them. They glow faintly, steady but subdued, like coals cooling after a fire. You lean against the railing, listening to the water lap below, and feel the night folding in around you. The horizon is vast and dark, but dotted with the faintest specks. Some are stars, some are lanterns too distant to tell apart. Their differences don't matter anymore. The sky and sea have merged into one canvas, stitched together with memory. Futurists still argue whether rituals like this carry forward into centuries of floating cities, or whether they will dissolve into archived nostalgia. But here, in the hush of afterglow, you feel the persistence. The lanterns may fade, but the act of release endures. A stray lantern drifts close to the platform, bobbing in the tide. It glows weakly, a survivor of its own failed ascent. You crouch, cup your hands around it, and for a moment its light brightens, as though grateful to be noticed. You smile, then let it go, watching it drift back into the tide. Not every lantern reaches the stars. Some are meant to rest gently on the water, carrying wishes just a little closer to shore. Behind you, a family lingers. A child yawns, tugging at her father's sleeve. "Are the lanterns gone?" she asks sleepily. He shakes his head. "No, they're just resting where we can't see." The girl nods, satisfied, and closes her eyes before he even finishes the sentence. You breathe deeply, comforted by the simplicity of her answer. The afterlight wraps you in stillness. The laughter, the music, the food, the games, all have quieted into memory. What remains is softer, the hush of water, the faint pulse of lantern glow, and the warmth of knowing that countless wishes are now drifting overhead, stitched invisibly into the night. You close your eyes, leaning into the railing, and let the festival's echo cradle you. The night slows, the tide steady beneath the floating city. Lanterns have faded into distance, their glow scattered so far into the dark that even the stars can no longer keep track. And yet their presence lingers, soft after-images on your eyelids, warmth in the chest, a memory that hums instead of shouts. You breathe in slowly, the air salted and cool, and feel how each inhale lengthens, each exhale eases. The walkway beneath you sways gently, carrying you with it, like a cradle made of sea. The sounds are muted now, the hush of water lapping against bamboo stilts, the occasional creak of rope, the faint whisper of someone far away laughing in their sleep. All else has gone quiet. The lanterns above, those last faint points, dim a little more, their climb almost finished. You imagine them drifting into vastness, carrying stories and wishes to no one in particular and to everyone at once. You picture them joining the constellations not as invaders but as gentle companions, patient enough to fade when dawn returns. Your body softens, shoulders loosen, jaw unclenches, breath finds its rhythm. The night has no more parades, no more debates, no more games or feasts. Only the echo of glow remains, and even that echo is dimming. You are part of that dimming too, sinking slowly into the comfort of release. The city itself seems to sigh, settling into its own sleep. The ocean rocks it gently. Somewhere, engineers finish their notes, archivists close their ledgers, children dream with sticky fingers still curled. And you, here at the edge, drift into stillness, lantern glow dissolving into the calm of dark. End of script. Sweet dreams.